Chapter 334. Eruption begins. Sorry, due to my illness, I am writing slowly and the update is late. My tracheitis is acting up and I am coughing non-stop. However, no matter what, today's eruption must be completed. GOR Chapter 315 Internecine Slaughter. The gigantic scorpion monster's movements were extremely fast. The moment Shea retreated, the scorpion monster had already rushed forward. In just the blink of an eye, it had arrived before Shea. Its gigantic body cast a shadow over Shea and its pair of pincers swept toward Shea's waist. Shea did not have any weapons in his hand. He could not use his arms to block the attack. Suddenly, he caught sight of the scorpion monster's broken pincer lying on the ground. He grabbed it with both hands and barely managed to block the attack. With a bang, Shea immediately felt a strange force coming from the scorpion monster. He was forced to take several steps back. Thankfully, the gigantic pincer in his hand remained intact. Clearly, the scorpion monster's pincers were tough enough. With a weapon in his hand, Shea felt somewhat at ease. The scorpion monster's attack had failed and it became enraged. Its pair of pincers made caw-caw sounds as it attacked again. Shea could only hold onto the broken pincer in his hand to defend himself. After jumping up and down a few times, Shea gradually became aware of something strange. He could clearly sense that his body, be it in terms of strength, speed, or agility, had improved by a large margin compared to before. That was especially true of his reaction speed. Although the scorpion monster's movements were fast enough, Chen Xiaolian was able to effortlessly capture its movements. No matter how the scorpion monster attacked or how fast it sped up, Chen Xiaolian would always be able to catch up to it. Before the scorpion monster could even attack, Chen Xiaolian would be able to predict its next move. Most importantly, his own strength. The weight of the broken pincer that he was holding onto was likely several times heavier than the heaviest standard hammer used by the Imperial Army. However, after swinging the pincer around a dozen times, Chen Xiaolian's face did not turn red nor did he gasp for breath. And the strength of his body seemed to be far greater than before. Just now, when the scorpion monster pounced, its pair of pincers fiercely smashed down. Shea raised the broken pincers with both hands to block. When the scorpion monster's pincers smashed down, it was like two heavy hammers fiercely pounding. Shea could clearly feel the opponent's vigorous strength. If it was in the past, this would be enough to make him unable to bear. Even if he didn't vomit blood, he would probably be forced to kneel on the spot. But now, not only had he blocked the opponent's attack, but he didn't feel any strain at all. He even had energy left over. When the scorpion swung its tail and stabbed him with its stinger, he still had energy left over to dodge. The most important thing is that after continuously receiving several heavy impacts, if it was in the past, even if he wasn't knocked down on the spot, he would inevitably feel stuffy in his chest, gasping for breath, or lack of strength. But now, he still feels energetic and doesn't feel the slightest bit strenuous. He waved the broken pincer in his hand. The huge broken pincer was bigger than his body. Waving it back and forth like this was somewhat ridiculous. After dodging a few times, the scorpion finally reacted. It probably felt that it couldn't finish off the prey in front of it with its strength, so it suddenly sped up. Its pair of huge pincers kept clamping around, and at the same time, the frequency of the swinging of its scorpion tail increased. The scorpion's tail was the most fatal part of the scorpion's attack. Shea immediately became flustered. Even if his speed and strength had increased by a large amount, and even if the scorpion's speed was fast, he still wouldn't be able to react. But he, Great Master Shea, only had 2 arms. It was already difficult enough to deal with the scorpion's pair of pincers, but he also had to deal with the scorpion's tail that attacked from above from time to time. Finally, the scorpion's tail stabbed over again. Shea blocked it with the broken pincer in his hand, but this time, the hook of the scorpion's tail directly jammed Shea's weapon. Shea felt a strong force pulling him outwards. He desperately wanted to hold on, but the scorpion's strength was too great. The hook of its tail not only lifted the weapon in Shea's hand directly, but also lifted Shea's body directly into the air. Shea was in the air, holding on tightly to the weapon in his hand. He heard the wind whistling in his ears. The scorpion's tail swung back and forth twice, and he suddenly felt a little dizzy. Finally, after he was finally thrown into the air, the scorpion's tail retracted and stretched out in midair, directly stabbing at Shea's waist and abdomen. The hook of the scorpion's tail was huge like a sickle. If he was pierced, he was afraid that he would end up with his intestines pierced through on the spot. Shea was in midair, so he had no way to borrow strength and his body couldn't dodge. He could only roar and use his almost perverted physical fitness to forcefully twist his waist in midair. This movement could only be completed by relying on the strength of his waist and abdomen. Just by twisting his body, he felt a whoosh. The hook of the scorpion's tail brought along a gust of wind, and it almost brushed past Shea's waist. The sharp hook directly tore Shea's clothes into pieces. Shea used both his hands and legs to hug the scorpion's tail. This scorpion was too huge. Even with its tail, Shea couldn't hug it with both arms. He could only hold on tightly. The huge scorpion felt that its tail was caught by Shea. It immediately spun back and forth a few times, vigorously twisting its tail up and down. It spun Shea around like a windmill. The pitiful bumpkin could only hold on tightly closing his eyes and refusing to let go. This scorpion simply approached the edge of the cave, and its huge scorpion tail slammed into the wall a few times. Its strength was great. After a few swings of its tail, the walls of the cave were smashed into pieces. Shea made a few close contact with the solid walls of the cave, but unexpectedly found that he didn't suffer any injuries. His body was surprisingly strong. Only his clothes were torn and his body was shaken to the point where he almost couldn't hold on to the scorpion's tail. This scorpion desperately swung for a while, but it couldn't shake off Shea. It seemed to be straining itself as well. After spinning a few more times, it finally slowed down. Shea could only hold on tightly to the scorpion's tail. He thought to himself, Lao Tzu won't come down. What can a stupid insect like you do to me? Unfortunately, this scorpion's pair of pincers were unable to reach Shea, who was on its tail. Shea was feeling pleased with himself when he suddenly heard the sound of rocks falling from above. He raised his head and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. From the hole above his head, another scorpion had drilled in. Moreover, this scorpion's head was a full size bigger than the one below him. Shea's anger was no small matter. He immediately cursed, "Damned Hastings! What the hell are you doing up there? You borrowed Lao Tzu's flaming fork. You caused Lao Tzu to be unarmed. Just one of them almost took my life. You King let go of another one. Are you purposely trying to kill me?" Shea didn't know if Hastings heard his curses from above. However, he didn't have the time to consider whether Hastings heard him or not. The huge scorpion that had scurried down from above had clearly discovered Shea below. Its huge body scurried down from above with its initial stage dexterity and agility, and its pair of pincers ruthlessly swept towards Shea. At this time, Shea had no choice but to quickly let go of his hand. His feet kicked off the scorpion's tail fiercely and he scuttled to the side. He used almost all of his strength in this scuttling, afraid that he would be too slow. As a result, his body was like an arrow released from a bow as he directly plunged into the far side of the cave. With a bang, Shea's head directly hit the rock wall. This time, Shea jumped with all of his strength. His strength was no small matter. Immediately, Shea's head plunged into the originally metal-devouring ant's hole in the wall. The hole that was originally only the size of a bowl was directly blasted open by Shea. Not only did his head enter, even half of his shoulder was stuck inside. This time, he was like a radish that had been plunged into a pit. The country bumpkin was naturally dizzy from the impact. The fact that his brain didn't directly burst open was thanks to his abnormally strong physique. However, the problem was that his head and half of his shoulder were stuck in the hole. The pitiful country bumpkin's 2 legs were desperately kicking outside, but he couldn't get out. Looks like Lao Tzu is going to die here. Shea's heart was overwhelmed with shock. His head was stuck in the hole, and it was completely dark. He couldn't see any movement outside. However, he was very clear that in his current state, any one of the 2 scorpions below would be able to cut him in half with a snap of their pincers. However, he waited for a while. Originally, he had almost resigned himself to his fate of waiting for death. However, the expected attack did not come. Shea struggled for a while. With his immense strength, he was able to split open the hole a little. Finally, he fiercely shook his shoulders and with a bang, he retreated out from the hole. He fell from the rock wall of the cave to the ground and landed in a corner. His buttocks landed on the ground, but it didn't hurt much. Shea gasped for breath. He was wondering why the scorpions didn't attack him while his head was stuck in the hole. When he raised his head, Shea couldn't help but become dumbfounded. Inside the cave, the 2 giant scorpions were locked in a fight. It turned out that the scorpion that had just come down had originally extended its pincers to attack Shea. However, Shea had jumped away at the last moment. As a result, the scorpion above was unable to clamp down on Shea. Instead, it clamped down on the tail of the scorpion below. The strength of this scorpion was immense. With this clamp, a small portion of the tail of the scorpion below was cut off. Only less than a third of the tail remained attached to the scorpion's body. It was also on the verge of collapsing. The scorpion below felt pain and immediately became ferocious. Without caring about anything else, it turned around and brandished its pincers to viciously pinch down on the scorpion above. For a moment, the 2 giant scorpions were locked in a fight and didn't pay any attention to Shea, who was at the side. What the hell? Shea sat on the ground and stared with wide eyes. It was at this moment that a crashing sound suddenly came from above. Shea's heart immediately pounded. That damned Hastings, did he release another one? Raising his head to look, Shea immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He saw Hastings' figure slowly climbing down from the hole above. His body floated down like a leaf, and he gently landed beside Shea. He glanced at Shea and gently patted him on the shoulder. "What did you scold me for just now?" Shea snorted. Hastings had already stuffed the flaming fork into Shea's hand. "Your weapon. I'm returning it to you." Shea remained silent. Hastings sneered. "Are you so grateful to your savior?" Shea was furious. "Savior? Lao Tzu nearly died because of you. How did you save my life?" "Humph!" Hastings sneered. "If I hadn't cast a spell, do you think these things would have killed each other?" He pointed at the 2 scorpion monsters that were already tangled up in the cave. Shea was dumbfounded. You did this?" Hastings didn't directly answer. Instead, he casually crossed his arms and stood to the side. "Just now I fought for a while and killed 2 of them. Only then did I manage to find something to knock on the door. These things have super strong defensive power. Breaking through their outer shell is really not easy. Their attack power is also first class. Moreover, the corrosive poison of the green mucus is also very overbearing. However, I found their weakness. The power displayed by these things is comparable to the highest level of magical beasts. But what surprised me was that their spiritual power and intelligence are surprisingly low. They are simply like low-level beasts." Shea's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely felt that something was amiss. Hastings smiled and pointed to the front. The 2 giant scorpions were tangled up and rolling further away. They fought each other until they were on the verge of death. As for the scorpion below, its tail was badly damaged and it was at a disadvantage. The scorpion above quickly stabbed its head with its poisonous stinger. However, before it died, it waved its pincers and clamped down on the scorpion's stinger. "These 2 things are dead for sure. There is no need to look. Hastings had already reached out with his hand to pull Shea up. Shea was holding the flaming fork that Hastings had returned to him. The flaming fork was covered in the green mucus. However, it felt as though the flaming fork had become heavier, it seemed to have increased in weight. Go up. There is no need to worry this time. The things above should be almost dead, Hastings said and grabbed Shea's back. With a flick of his right arm, Shea was thrown up. Shea quickly grabbed the rock at the top of the cave and scolded, "The next time you do something, can you at least say something first?" Hastings laughed from below and also jumped up. He said, "All right, be careful." After saying that, he reached out with his hand and slapped Shea's thigh. 4,000 chapters first. I will continue to update the next chapter later. Tonight's outburst will not be skipped. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 335. Geor Chapter 316 Shea's Discovery. Shea immediately felt his body being pushed by a force, and he was sent flying. The wind howled beside his ears as he flew up through the hole. After a while, Shea saw light before his eyes and he flew out from one of the holes. Clearly, this was the upper floor of the cave. The size of this cave was about the same as the one below. However, at present, the ground of the cave was littered with the corpses of tens of those giant scorpions. One glance was all it took to determine that 2 or 3 of them were Hastings's handiwork. All of them had either their heads or tails cut off. Clearly, they had been hacked to death by the sharp flaming fork. As for the rest of the scorpions, they were all in groups of 2s and 3s as they fought each other to death. There were also 2 scorpions that had been flipped over. Their abdomens had been cut open by their own kind. Colorful and disgusting internal organs flowed out. Seeing that, Shea's heart raced. He frowned and turned his head away. Hastings had already jumped up from below. After jumping out of the hole, he gently landed beside Shea. Observing the expression on Shea's face, he smiled and asked, "What is it?" "I don't know why, but when I see these things I keep getting an uncomfortable feeling." Shea's face was somewhat ugly to behold. He felt a strange impulse within his heart. It was as if looking at the corpses in front of him, the scene of the battle, and especially the way the monsters died with their intestines and stomachs torn apart, not only did he not feel disgusted, but he also felt restless and violent in his heart. He tightened his grip on the fiery fork, and in an instant, an impulse to rush forward and chop the corpses of these giant scorpions into pieces was born in his heart. This kind of impulse scared Shea himself. How could Lao Tzu have such a perverted thought? He quickly shook his head and said, "These monsters, where did they come from?" Hearing that question, Hastings suddenly laughed out. The corners of his lips curled into a pleased smile. There was also a trace of joy within it. "Ha ha! That was what made me the happiest. Do you want to know where these things came from? Look at the surrounding walls." "Walls?" Shea looked around. This cave was also circular. The surrounding walls should have been smooth, but looking at it now, the walls were full of bumps and hollows. There were more than 10 huge pits. These pits were in the shape of a round cocoon. It was as if something had just dug out more than 10 pieces from the wall. Looking at the pits, Shea suddenly had a thought. Could it be these scorpions came out from the walls? To be exact, they were originally sealed in this wall. Just a while ago, they were suddenly awakened and crawled out from inside. Hastings rubbed his chin and said excitedly, "Just now, when I came up here alone, I saw the walls suddenly emitting light everywhere. Then, the walls began to crack and a huge cocoon appeared. Stone cocoon. Before I could react, those stone cocoons cracked open and these monsters crawled out from them. Sealed in stone cocoons, buried in the walls and rocks, then, they were suddenly awakened." Shea thought about it and said, "Hearing you say that, these things seem to be, that's right. Do you think so too?" Hastings appeared very happy. That's what I guessed as well. These things must be the defensive power set up by the gnomes who built this place. These monsters were probably sealed up using some kind of magic array to hide them inside. However, once an external force enters and causes damage to this place, these things will be awakened and automatically attack the intruder. After saying that, Hastings glanced at Shea. If you had not played tricks on me earlier, I would not have had to break through this cave. Because I broke through this cave, I triggered the defensive magic array here and woke up these guards. Shea gave an embarrassed smile and said, in other words, I almost got killed by these things. So, I reaped what I sowed? Hastings gave Shea a sidelong glance. His expression seemed to say, what do you think? After killing these guards, what is there to be happy about? Shea pursed his lips to the side and said, you are a mighty expert. Killing a few scorpions is not a big deal. Is there a need to be so happy? What a simple-minded fellow. Hastings harumphed and said, to think that there would be such a hidden magic array here. This is something that we did not notice before. This proves one thing. This place is more complicated than what we have seen. Maybe there are other secrets that we have yet to discover. Maybe the thing that I am looking for is here. It is just hidden in a place that we cannot see. Clearly, being attacked by these awakened guards had stimulated the last glimmer of hope in Hastings' heart. He appeared to be very excited. He left Shea behind and began searching the cavern on this floor. The cavern was neither too big nor too small. Hastings began searching the caverns on the walls where the giant scorpions were sealed. Shea, on the other hand, felt somewhat displeased. After standing there for a moment, he said, you can slowly look around here. I remember the upper floor and the things that I looted. When I came down earlier, I did not bring them with me. Since I am back, I will go up and look around. If I find a way to leave this place, I can bring them with me. Hastings appeared to be in a hurry to find what he was looking for. He ignored Shea and waved his hand. However, he smiled and said, go. However, don't think about running away. This place is only so big. Even if you want to run, you will not be able to escape. Shea snorted. He raised his head and looked up. The ceiling of this floor had also been pierced by Hastings. Back then, Shea had locked Hastings up on the top floor. Shea climbed up the ceiling and entered the hole. Using both his hands and feet, he climbed up. It did not take long for him to reach the top floor. This was the first place that the two of them had arrived at after entering this place. The cavern with a turntable in the middle and several sealed storage rooms around it. Everything here was normal. The only difference was that Hastings had pierced a large hole in the ground. In one of the storage rooms, the iron door had been shattered by Hastings. Shea's bag was already in tatters. He simply took off his clothes and used them as a bag. Then, he tied up the things that he looted. He was still feeling a little unsatisfied, so he ran to the storage rooms to take a look and confirmed that there was nothing left for him to loot. Shea finally sighed. After considering it for a moment, he wiped his face and laughed out. A man whose heart is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Ha ha, with so many good things, Lao Tzu, what is there to feel regretful about? As long as we can get out of here, the combat power of my Moore County army will increase by several fold. Enough, enough. As long as we can get out of here alive, this trip will be worth it. Since he had nothing else to do, he simply sat down on the turntable in the middle. Casually leaning back, he rested his back on the turntable. Even though he was bored to death, he was not anxious. After all, with an expert like Hastings around, he would be able to find a way to get him out of here. With the existence of the oath, he must be able to get him out of here alive. At any rate, the most difficult problem would be solved by someone else. Thus, he was more than happy to relax. After resting for a moment, he suddenly reached out with his hand to feel the ground beside him. His hand found the bottom part of the turntable behind him. The uneven surface was none other than the engravings on the turntable. In the beginning, Shea did not pay much attention to it. He lowered his head to look at the engravings on the turntable and retracted his gaze. However, after sitting down for a moment, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned around and lowered his head to look carefully for a moment. Then, his face sank. Shea jumped up from the ground. He subconsciously opened his mouth to cry out in shock. Thankfully, he quickly covered his mouth. His eyes shone and he stared intently at the engravings on the turntable. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. Countless thoughts flashed through Shea's mind in an instant. Ha ha. Hastings, you went down to look for it for so long and yet you failed to find it. Yet you actually managed to find it. It is not down there at all. Rather, it is on the first floor at the top. It is on the first floor. Ha 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 ha. These ancient gnomes are truly cunning. They had placed such an important item in the most eye-catching place on the first floor. What did Shea discover? He had originally thought that the turntable was only used to control the doors of the surrounding storage rooms. By turning the turntable to a certain engravings, one would be able to open the corresponding door. This logic appeared to be correct. However, there were two more problems. For example, by opening the first door, turning the turntable to the first engravings. This was not wrong. However, what if the second door was opened? When the turntable reached the second engravings, wouldn't it also go through the first engravings at the same time? Wouldn't it also open the first door at the same time? Since it was a storage room, there should not be such a loophole in the design, right? That meant that this engravings was definitely one engravings for a storage room. There was no way it could be mixed up with the other doors. In other words, if one were to directly open the second door and turn the turntable to the second engravings, even after passing through the first engravings, the first door would not open. Based on this deduction, the next problem was, after opening the door, how do you close it? In this world, there should not be a storage room that could only be opened but not closed, right? How preposterous! Then it was simple. Just turn the turntable back to the original engravings. Shea's mind was only casually turning over this idea. Originally, this idea was not that important. However, when this idea of pushing the turntable back to the original engravings popped up, he suddenly remembered something. Back then, in the real creation god area, that guy called Ada had told him about the true mystery of the knobs made by the gnomes. Push it back. Shea's mouth revealed a trace of a proud smile. Second update. Wait a moment. I will continue to update and explode. Brothers and sisters who stayed up late can also choose to rest first and read it tomorrow morning. I guarantee that when you turn on your computer tomorrow morning, you will see a satisfactory amount of updates. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 336. GOR Chapter 317. The Secret of Numbers. Shea did not have a good impression of the humanoid dragon called Darwin. Moreover, that humanoid dragon could be considered as one of the strongest in terms of intelligence that Shea had ever met among the people that Shea had met after leaving the mountain. Besides Darwin, only that old bastard Cavasher could make him feel suffocated in front of Darwin. That Ada fellow, it was as though everything he did and every word he said could make him suffer. Although that fellow's strength seemed weak, he had nearly gotten him killed. Therefore, Shea subconsciously remembered those words that Darwin had said. He clearly remembered that Ada had explained to him the true mystery of these knobs refined from ancient times in the underground cave beside the Jaku tribe. Darwin had said this at that time. That red moon scale was the unit of record for the ancient gnomes. According to the ancient gnomes' calendar, they called the third day of every month Red Moon Day. Therefore, Red Moon, in the eyes of the ancient gnomes, represented the number 3. The first time you turned the knob to red moon, it meant that you had opened the door to warehouse number 3. The most important part was the second part. However, when you turned the knob to red moon for the second time, you made a mistake. You did not reset the number to 0. Therefore, when you turned the knob back to the beginning and turned to red moon scale, you had opened door number 33. 2 3s. Do you understand? At this moment, Shea stood beside the turntable and stared at it. So the mystery was here. Since this was the most important place for the gnomes, the place where the most important results were stored, how could the results of the hundreds of years of the Creation God project only contain a few insignificant doors? How could there be only a few small rooms? The answer was obvious. Although there were only 8 scales on the turntable, there must be more than 8 warehouses here. The key was, there were multiple numbers. Now that Shaya understood in his heart, he immediately took action. He looked at the first door and smiled. Then, he pushed the turntable up to the initial scale. After a while, the door of the first room fell down and closed. Shea laughed out loud. Ha ha. Alright, this can be considered as returning to the initial scale. He quickly turned the turntable again. This time, he pushed the turntable to the first scale. Without waiting for the gate to open, he immediately pushed the turntable back to the original scale. Then, he pushed the turntable to the first scale again. According to Ada's theory, the room that was open like this was no longer number 1. Instead, it should be number 11. Shea nervously stared at the first door. Finally, a few cracking sounds could be heard. As the iron door slowly rose up once again, Shea bit his lips and swung his fist in excitement. Success! Success! I wasn't wrong. When the gate was pulled up, Shea saw what was inside the gate and immediately confirmed that he had guessed correctly. Why? It was very simple. The room inside the gate was not empty. The mussel fruits, that should have been stored in the first gate, had already been plundered clean by Shea. But now, when the gate was opened again, the inside was not empty. There were a lot of sealed jars with a metallic luster inside. Although he still did not know what was inside. But at least he could be sure that when the gate was opened again, the storage room inside was no longer the same as before. The mystery was that the first time he opened the number 1 warehouse, and now the one opened was number 11. Shea was so excited that he wanted to throw his head back and laugh loudly. But then, he remembered that Hastings was still on the floor below. Lao Tzu will first search and see if there is anything good. Shea laughed in his heart. If I really find something that can make me a god, then I might have to say sorry to Hastings. After all, he is an enemy and not a friend. Shea will get it first. He felt a burst of pride and hurried to the gate to take a closer look. He did not know what the metal jars inside were. Shea hesitated for a moment and thought to himself, I can't be too greedy. Before Hastings comes up, if I can find the treasure that can make me a god first. But then, the question left for Shea was, if the goblins really stored the most important things here, then, which warehouse would they be stored in? If it was calculated according to the complex numbers, the number of warehouses here would probably be impossible to estimate. Using the first gate as an example, there might be number 1, number 11, number 111, but there were a total of 8 gates here. How long would it take to search one by one? Shea's brain worked quickly. It had to be said that our country bumpkin was not stupid at all. He was not stupid at all. On the contrary, Shea was actually an extremely cunning and smart guy. Otherwise, how could a legendary figure like the old guy teach an idiot? Moreover, how could a real idiot grow up in a place like Wildfire Town? Our country bumpkin was just too good at pretending to be a fool and was used to pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. When he really used his brain, he was usually smarter than most people thought. If it was me, if I were the leader of the goblins, where would I hide the things? Shea immediately found the most effective way of thinking. This way of thinking was taught to him by the old guy. He remembered that when Shea was still young, he was hunting in the mountains in autumn. In order to catch a cunning wolf, he racked his brains. In the end, the old guy directly said, "Idiot, think about it. If you were that wolf, what would you do?" At that time, the young Shea was finally enlightened after being hit on the head by the old guy a few times with a wooden stick. After thinking about it, he analyzed a way. That wolf had been chased by him for a few days without being able to hunt for food. Even if it could starve, it still needed to drink water. In the end, he set up a few traps around the nearby water source. Finally, he succeeded in catching that beast. And now, if Lao Tzu was that goblin, what would he do? Shea's brows were tightly knitted together. After a while, he hit his head hard. "Dora." "What?" Dora's voice sounded in his mind. Shea whispered, "Do you still remember the contents of that goblin's diary?" Dora snorted. "Of course I remember. I'm a dragon. The most intelligent race. Even though I'm only left with my soul, I'm still the most intelligent race. I will never forget anything I read." "Very good." Shea slapped his thigh. "The last entry in the diary. What's the date?" Dora was silent. After a while, she said, "You actually guessed it like that? What's wrong?" "Nothing, you seem to be very smart." Shea snickered. "All right, hurry up and tell me." Dora's voice was very cautious. "I remember the last entry in the diary is day 42, because at that time they had been forced to retreat into the cave. There was no way for them to know the exact time outside. And day 42. That's right. The opening of the last entry was written like that. 42. That should be the number." Shea laughed. "If this is a secret warehouse, then the goblin commander might have hidden the item in a warehouse that he was most familiar with at the last moment." After saying that, he quickly jumped to the side of the turntable. He first moved the turntable back to its original position. After the door closed, he turned the turntable to the fourth number. Then, he quickly pulled it back and turned it to the second number, 42, 42. Shea nervously watched as the fourth door slowly opened. This time, however, Shea was disappointed. Clearly, the answer was not 42. After the door opened, they were clearly in a new room. There were several strange-looking metal cabinets inside. However, the metal shelves were empty. "It seems I guessed wrong. The item is not in warehouse number 42. Shea frowned and pondered for a moment. At that moment, within his mind, Dora suddenly gave a faint sigh. "I guessed it." "What?" Dora calmly said. "I said I guessed it." After pausing for a moment, Dora's voice seemed to carry a faint trace of loneliness. "You are right. Since it is a secret warehouse, the goblin commander might have used a number that he was most familiar with and most engraved in his heart." Before Shea could ask, Dora directly gave the answer. "Try it. 54,266. Ah? What number is that?" Shea was stunned. "Fifth era, New God era, year 429, missing moon and sun," Dora calmly said. "In the ancient goblin calendar, missing moon and sun should be the sixth day. Thus, fifth era, New God era, year 429 can be seen as 54,266. Adding the last, missing moon and sun, it means 6. This set of numbers should be 54,266. It must be this, there is no mistake. This should be the number that the goblin general had engraved in his heart." Shea was stunned for a moment. "Fifth era, New God era, year 429, missing moon and Sunday. What date is this? How can you be so sure?" Dora gently smiled, her voice somewhat sad. "I just happened to remember the last sentence at the end of the diary on this date. Today is the 22nd birthday of His Majesty Hardman's little princess Lulu. May her birth be everlasting. That goblin general loved his little princess so much. Naturally, he would use the birthday of his most beloved person as the password number. Hearing that, Shaya's heart was immediately filled with excitement. But then, he suddenly heard a soft sigh in his mind. Dora's voice seemed to be filled with infinite sadness. "Dora, how did you guess it?" "Humph," Dora calmly said. "Although I am not that goblin, at least I have loved before. Speaking of which, when I wrote the last sentence, 'at least I have loved before,' I felt an inexplicable sense of melancholy. But very good. This is the writing state I want. Alright, today's outburst of 10,000 words is complete. I originally wanted to outburst more, but the tracheitis was really bad. I originally thought it was a small problem, but I didn't expect it to become so serious. However, 10,000 words isn't too little. It hasn't reached the maximum of 15,000 words that I said before. I will wait for my body to get better before outbursting again. In the end, these 10,000 words will count as Fridays. There will still be an update on Saturday. I'm so tired. It's already been 2 days. I'm going to sleep, everyone. Have a good weekend. I almost forgot. Please vote for me. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 337. GOR Chapter 318. Behind that door, Dora's voice was very soft, so soft that when Shaya heard it, he could faintly feel an extreme sense of emptiness. At this moment, just by listening to Dora's voice, he could actually feel an indescribable sadness in his heart. Love? If it was in the past, Shaya would most likely laugh out loud and then tease Dora like he was used to. Something along the lines of, "Who would a female T-Rex like you fall in love with?" Or, "Don't you dragons mate according to your needs, just like wild beasts?" If it had been in the past, he would have said a few words of this kind of slightly malicious ridicule. In any case, Shaya was already used to bickering with this female T-Rex from time to time. Words like idiot, country bumpkin would also emerge from Dora's mouth endlessly. But today, at this moment, after Dora said those words, Shaya was silent. For the first time, he did not say a single vicious word. Because he could hear the deep sadness hidden behind Dora's seemingly calm words. A very, very sad feeling perhaps, as young as Shaya was. He still couldn't understand how distant the sadness contained in Dora's seemingly light words were. He could only keenly capture the sadness within, but he was unable to understand where this emotion came from. The young Shaya had yet to understand the true meaning of the vicissitudes of life behind the simple words, love. Perhaps, in Shaya's heart, he could not help but wonder, shouldn't love between a man and a woman be a happy thing? Why did this female T-Rex Dora say it in such a sad tone, as though someone in her family had died? Fine, let us forgive this country bumpkin's ignorance. After all, although our young Mr. Shaya Thunder's emotional experience is somewhat bizarre, but in the end, he has yet to openly and honestly fall in love with a woman. It would appear that all this while, the storms of love that accompanied him, those matters, were somewhat she couldn't quite make sense of it. It was all a little too fucking ridiculous. Fine, for the nth time, this old fellow is grinning from ear to ear. However, at this moment, our Shaya was displaying the kind side of his heart. Normally, when he was bickering with Dora, he would say all sorts of vicious words. That was usually the case. At any rate, the two of them were already entangled together. When they were free, they would scheme against each other and bicker for fun. But at this moment, sensing the deep sadness from Dora, Shaya's heart softened. After a moment of silence, he scratched the back of his head. He spoke softly. "Hey, are you all right? Are you all right? We are simple country bumpkins. Clearly, when it comes to comforting others, our ability to do so is very limited." He did not know how to comfort a woman who had been hurt by love. Fine, you can say that Dora is not a woman. She is a female T-Rex, all right. Of course I am not all right. Dora finally regained her previous harshness and sharpness. She said coldly, I'm already a dead ghost now. My physical body has been skinned and dismembered by you. I have no choice but to ask a little fool like you to help me return to the holy tomb. The most hateful thing is that after so long, you still haven't been able to help me. All right, when this matter is over and I have time, the first thing I will do is to help you return to that whatever holy tomb. Shea patted his chest. I hope you can do it. You idiot, when you get hot-headed, you always cause a lot of trouble, Shea laughed. Not bad, not bad. You are actually scolding me again. That means you are really all right. After saying that, he stopped bickering with Dora. Instead, he hugged the roulette wheel. The number is 54,266, right? My God, this number is so damn long. If I had not guessed the answer, I fear that if I were to continue searching, I would have to search tens of thousands of times before I could find it. He quickly returned the roulette wheel to its original position. Then, he took a deep breath and spun the roulette wheel 5 times. After the 5 numbers were correct, Shea took 2 steps back and stared intently at the door. Finally, the gate slowly rose up bit by bit. When the door was fully opened, the storage room inside was revealed. Shea stood in the same spot. His face instantly became incomparably strange. He stared inside. He stared inside the storage room. This room was not empty. There was indeed something inside. However, this thing was... This is the thing that we are looking for? Shea looked inside the storage room and an ugly smile appeared on his face. This room wasn't too big, but it wasn't like the other warehouses that were filled with all kinds of containers or bottles. There was only one thing inside the room. It was a sculpture. A sculpture made entirely out of green crystal gems. The sculpture was placed inside the room. Its transparent green body was gently tiptoeing, and it appeared as though it was gently turning. This was a woman, or rather, a female goblin. That is right, this was a goblin. She had the typical green skin of a goblin and long pointed ears. Like most goblins, her nose and mouth were sharp and protruding. She also had the most typical characteristic of a goblin. Her upper body was long and her legs were somewhat short. However, even though the characteristics of the goblin race were very obvious, even though such a goblin should be ugly, miraculously, in Shea's eyes, this female goblin sculpture was not ugly at all. In fact, he had a strange feeling that this was a very beautiful young female goblin. That is right, the word that appeared in Shea's mind was beautiful. Alright, it had to be said that this feeling had nothing to do with Shea's cursed aesthetic standard. After looking at this sculpture for a while, Dora sighed in his mind. She is so beautiful. Yes, that is right. This sculpture, she was very beautiful. Unlike modern goblins, this ancient goblin statue's body was plump and healthy, unlike most modern goblins that Shea had seen who were starving and malnourished for many years and were emaciated. As for modern goblins, most of them had bulging green bellies. However, this was not the case on this sculpture. Her body proportions were just right. Looking at the sculpture, he could see that she was wearing a very gorgeous dress. Especially the full chest area, it highlighted the charm of a woman. Even though her ears were a little too long and drooped down like most goblins, they gave off a nimble feeling. Even though her nose and mouth were protruding and sharp, they added a kind of knife-like beauty to the sculpture. Most importantly, Shea didn't know why, but he felt a kind of power from this sculpture that made his heart faintly tremble. Even he couldn't tell where this strange feeling came from. This sculpture is a little strange. Shea frowned and touched his nose. Why do I suddenly have a feeling of pity when I look at her? As if. That is because the owner of the sculpture poured too much love into the sculpture. Dora replied softly and even sighed faintly. Shea suddenly had a thought. You mean, This sculpture is Lulu, the lover of the writer of the diary, the last general of the last generation of goblins. Hearing this, Shea slowly walked over. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand, wanting to touch the statue, but he suddenly retracted his hand. This statue was so strange, as if it made people feel that they couldn't bear to blaspheme it. It was as if touching it was a kind of destruction to this kind of beauty. Shea sighed, we guessed the password number correctly. However, we did not expect that what we were looking for was not here, but a sculpture. This sculpture must have been carved by the Goblin General himself when he had nothing to do in order to express his love. In the end, he put this thing. Shea suddenly had a thought. No. That Goblin General, from the diary, should be a person who separates public from private interests. This is an important warehouse in the Creation God district. He would never put such a personal thing in such an important place. This sculpture must have some kind of trick. After walking around the sculpture once, Shea did not discover anything. Could it be that he had to break this sculpture? Perhaps there was some secret hidden inside? However, looking at this perfect sculpture, how could he bear to do it? If I say you are stupid, then you are stupid. Dora sneered, since this sculpture was made by the Goblin General, with his love for this female goblin. How could he hide the secret inside the sculpture? Wouldn't that mean that he would have to break the sculpture when he wanted to retrieve the thing inside? How could he bear to do that? Shea nodded. That seems to be right, but... He was silent for a moment and carefully stared at the sculpture for a long time. Then, he suddenly slapped his head. I understand. Look at the posture of this sculpture. The female goblin sculpture was tiptoeing and spinning in a graceful dance. Her two hands were placed in front of her chest, and she was in a posture of offering. Her hands. Shea glanced at the palm of the sculpture and immediately confirmed his guess. The palm of a goblin was different from that of a human. It only had 4 fingers, but this female goblin's fingers had 5. There is an extra one. If he looked carefully, he would find that the extra one on each of the 2 palms was not a finger. Instead, it was 2 transparent, dark green crystal rods. My body is really not feeling well. Today, it's a little less. I'll try to write more tomorrow. Sigh, this illness really came at a bad time. Actually, the content for the rest of the story has basically been conceptualized. If my condition is normal, I can definitely write it very quickly. Could it be that there is finally a problem with my character? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation votes. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 338. GOR Chapter 319 Magic Equipment. The size of the sculpture was almost exactly the same as a real person, and every detail of the sculpture was meticulous. It fully reflected that the sculptor must have poured a lot of passion into it when he made it. Due to this, the sculpture appeared so lifelike. That was especially true of the expression on the gnome girl's face. Even the lines at the corners of her eyes appeared as though they had come to life. Due to the fact that the sculpture was so lifelike, Shea had nearly overlooked the sculpture's hands. Gnomes were different from humans. Their hands only had 4 fingers. When Shea noticed the sculpture's hands, he saw that there was an extra thin finger on the outside of each of the 2 palms. The size of the finger was exactly the size of a human pinky finger. If he had not been looking carefully, it would have been difficult to notice it. Shea took a closer look and immediately noticed something wrong. The entire sculpture was a single entity, one that could almost be described as perfect. However, the 2 extra thin pinky fingers on the palms had destroyed the perfection of the sculpture. It was like a flaw on a beautiful piece of jade. Shea reached out with his hand to touch one of the thin fingers. After making contact with it, he suddenly uttered a "ee" sound. What is it? This thing seems to be of a different quality compared to the sculpture. After saying that, Shea bent down to examine it carefully. Then, he pinched the extra thin finger on the sculpture. Suddenly, a caw sound could be heard. Shea had effortlessly pried the finger off the sculpture's palm. Shea was immediately taken aback. He thought that he had used too much force and accidentally damaged the sculpture. If such a perfect piece of art were to be destroyed by his own hands, he would feel somewhat guilty. However, after taking a closer look, he found that that was not the case. The thin crystal that he had pried off was not part of the sculpture's palm. Shea held it in his hand and immediately discovered a problem. Firstly, the finger was made of a different material compared to the sculpture's entire body. The sculpture's entire body was made of a rarely seen translucent green-colored crystal. But this finger was different. Originally, when the finger was connected to the palm, it seemed to be a single entity. But once it was separated and looked at carefully, one would realize that the finger was actually a completely transparent and colorless crystal. The only reason why it looked green before was because of the green light emitted from the sculpture. The second question was, why was the finger stuck to the sculpture's palm? It didn't look like he had broken it himself, and there were no signs of it being broken either. Shea gave it a try and quickly discovered the knock on the door. It's like a magnet. It turned out that as long as this thin finger of crystal got close to the sculpture, it would immediately stick to it with a plop. It was as if there was a natural suction force that sucked it onto the sculpture's green crystal. He was like a magnet. Magnetic crystal? Shea couldn't help but laugh bitterly. What is that? There were 2 such fingers in total. Shea removed both of them from the sculpture's palm and held them in his hand. From the looks of it, this sculpture no longer had any flaws and had become perfect. But these 2 magnetic crystals, what are they? Why are they hidden here so secretively? Shea frowned and thought for a while. But this question was something that even the knowledgeable Dora could not answer. Dora also could not identify what these 2 magnetic crystals were. No matter what, this crystal sculpture of a goblin girl should be very valuable, right? Just such a large piece of green crystal is already extremely valuable, not to mention such a beautiful and exquisite sculpture. If taken outside, it would definitely be priceless. Shea swallowed his saliva. Dora's disdainful tone appeared in his mind. You crude person, do you only think about gold? You are now a high-ranking official, are you still so greedy? Shea snorted and ignored Dora. Instead, he circled around the sculpture as if he was thinking of a way to put this thing into his bag. But after looking for a while, Shea stopped. Such a large thing, completely carved to the size of a real person, his bag would definitely not be able to fit it. Damn. Shea could not help but feel a little regretful. He thought of Merlin. He remembered that Merlin had a spatial storage magic equipment on him that could carry a large amount of things. As long as he threw them into the spatial equipment, it would be very convenient to carry them. If there was a chance in the future, he would think of a way to get 1 or 2 spatial equipment on him. Just like today, standing in front of the ancient goblin's treasury, who knew how many rooms and treasures there were in this treasury. Unfortunately, he only had 2 arms. How could he carry so many things? Entering a treasure mountain without any gains, it really made him feel unreconciled. Magic equipment. Thinking of the magic equipment, Shea's mind flashed. Since his debut, he had not obtained much magic equipment, probably because he cultivated in the direction of martial arts. The magic equipment he owned was only a total of 2 or 3 pieces. The first one was the wind element ring that he had at the beginning. It was a good treasure for escaping. Later, after the magic power was used up, he threw it to Todoro. The second one was the water avoidance bead that he was carrying on him now. It was obtained from that guy Ada, but unfortunately, its magic power was also about to be used up. As for the other magic equipment, well, the magic carpet that Merlin had lent to him could also be counted as one. Well, thinking of this, Shaya's heart suddenly moved, as if he had faintly thought of something, but this thought only flashed through his mind, and he didn't react. For a moment, he couldn't catch it, but he faintly felt that this thought should be very important. He turned around twice and patted his head. Finally, he suddenly shouted, "Ah! I got it! It is magic power! Magic power!" Regardless of whether it was the wind element ring or the water avoidance bead, after his magic power was used up, these items became useless. He was not a magician. After the magic power of the magic equipment was used up, he did not have the ability to replenish it. As for Merlin's flying magic carpet, it seemed that it was also related to magic power. When he had first obtained the magic carpet, Todoro had exclaimed in surprise, saying that Merlin's skill in crafting magic equipment had reached the pinnacle. That was because he did not see any magic crystals or other items to store magic power on the magic carpet. Todoro could not understand what method Merlin had used to store magic power on the fur carpet. Magic power. These three pieces of equipment seemed to be related to magic power. Magic power, magic power. Shaya's eyes finally lit up. He turned around and took off the big bag on his body. He quickly untied it and rummaged through it, pulling out a large pile of items. He abruptly recalled that he had found a pile of rings in one of the storage rooms here. Hastings had said that it was a pile of magic equipment. However, the strange thing was that the rings were not inlaid with magic crystals. Instead, they were inlaid with strange little fruits, plants. It seemed that the ancient goblins had invented some miraculous techniques to grow plants and fruits that contained magic power. They were used to replace the expensive magic crystals and gems that were hard to mass-produce. Magic equipment. He now had a large pile of magic equipment on him. A large pile of rings was placed before him. There were 10 of them, big and small, colorful and of all shapes and sizes. Additionally, it was clear that the ancient goblins' techniques were truly miraculous. Despite having been stored here for so long, the fruits did not show any signs of decay. They remained plump and glossy. Even the rings appeared as though they were new. This should be the effect of magic. Perhaps there are some magic circles in the warehouse that we can't see that are used to store these things without damaging them. This was Dora's guess. Shaya did not care about this. The most important question he was concerned about was, "Dora, can you identify what these rings are used for?" Dora seemed to hesitate for a moment. The ancient goblins themselves were not creatures with magic abilities. The magic they invented was mostly based on the magic civilization of other races. Thus, we only need to follow the rules of the magic civilization of other races to make a rough guess. However, Dora then frowned and said, "What do you need these magic equipment for? You are not a magician. You don't know how to chant incantations and you don't have magic power. You can still use low-level magic equipment. However, when it comes to high-level magic equipment, you generally need to use complicated methods to activate them. You don't know how to chant incantations and you don't have magic power. You can't use them at all." Shaya laughed. "Dora, oh Dora, you also have times when you are confused." "What? I don't know how to chant incantations and I don't have magic power because I have never learned magic," Shaya said coolly. "However, didn't you also say that the ancient goblins were also a race that did not know magic? They also don't know how to chant incantations and they don't have magic power. Thus, I think, the magic props created by the goblins all have a common characteristic. They are specially made for people who do not know magic to use them." Dora was silent for a moment. Finally, she agreed with Shaya's words. "All right, what you said makes sense. But how did you come up with that?" "Ada." Shaya smiled and said, "I remember last time in the underground cave, Ada actually pushed out a magic cannon. That thing is a standard and powerful magic weapon. However, Ada does not have any magic power. Yet, he can still control it. He pointed at the pile of rings in front of him. Quick, tell me, can you identify what kind of magic these rings are used for? Dora thought for a moment and slowly said, generally speaking, the few races in today's world may have different magic civilizations, but the differentiation of magic attributes is basically the same. The few major elements are differentiated according to similar standard. After a moment of silence, Dora continued. For example, fire-type magic is usually triggered by red fire diamonds or red crystals. Thus, generally speaking, fire-type magic equipment is red in color. Water-type magic uses blue water diamonds. Water-type magic equipment is also generally blue in color. Earth-type equipment is yellow in color, wind-type equipment is generally white in color. There are also some minor elements such as plant-type, life-type, spirit-type etc. There is also black magic. Naturally, there is no need for me to say more. Generally, equipment is black in color. There are also some black magicians who are used to using bones to create props. Thus, there is also white in color. In that case, in most cases, magic equipment can be identified based on its color, right? And in most cases you can say that. Shea rubbed his hands. That makes things easier. After saying that, he pulled out a blue-colored fruit from the pile of rings and weighed it in his hand. This is blue. It should represent water type, right? As he said that, he waved the ring in his hand. How do I use it? Spirit power, I guess it is like this, Dora said. Although some races do not have magic talent, any high-level life form has spirit power. And magic, to a large extent, is refined from spirit power. In other words, if I hold this thing and think hard about it, it will work? Humph. For an idiot like you, you can only use such vulgar words to explain it. Dora said disdainfully. Shea could not be bothered with Dora's sarcasm. He held the ring in front of him and stared at it, trying hard to concentrate his spirit power. Water-type magic, activate, activate, activate. Sure enough, as Shea focused his spirit power, the ring suddenly reacted. Between Shea's two fingers, the ring suddenly emitted a mass of light boom. Red flames gushed out with a loud bang, instantly enveloping Shea's entire head from his shoulder to his head. The fire only lasted for a moment before it was extinguished. Thinking about it, this ring had been stored for many years, and there was not much magic left inside. But for Shea, his face had become as black as the bottom of a pot and his head of hair was mostly burned off. The remaining few were still emitting smoke. Cough, cough. Shea threw the ring away and black smoke came out from his mouth and nose. He swore. Bastard Dora! You played with Lao Tzu. Didn't you say that the blue color should be water type? Why is there fire? Sigh, the cough is so bad. Tracheitis is really torturous. I have fallen into a vicious cycle. When tracheitis is acting up, it is reasonable to say that you should not smoke. But those who know me know that my biggest habit over the years is that I have to smoke when I'm typing. I have to smoke and type over and over again to be able to write something. Otherwise, if I don't have a cigarette in my hand, I will always feel that something is wrong. But the problem is, when tracheitis is acting up, if I don't smoke, I can't write anything. If I smoke, the cough is even worse. It's so depressing. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 339. GOR Chapter 320 Divine Artifact. Thankfully, Shea's body was extremely strong. Had it been an ordinary human, they would have lost their lives. Shea coughed out black smoke as he continuously cursed Dora. Dora appeared speechless. After a moment of silence, she smiled wryly and said, I am not an ancient gnome. How could I have expected them to create magic equipment in such an unconventional manner, son of a bitch? Shea wiped his face. Although he had lost quite a bit of his hair, given the strength of his body, it would not take long for his hair to grow back. Since the blue one is of the fire type, then the red one is not of the fire type, right? Shea picked up a ring with a red fruit on it. Holding it in his hand, he focused. Boom! Another mass of red flames burst out and instantly engulfed Shea. Cough, 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 cough! Son of a bitch! The clothes on Shea's body were burned to tatters, and he had to roll on the ground twice to extinguish the flames. Then, he threw the red ring onto the ground and stepped on it viciously, causing the ring to be smashed to pieces. He furiously swore, "What the hell is this? The blue one is of the fire type. The red one is also of the fire type. Could it be that these ancient gnomes only know how to set fire?" Shea was driven mad. He picked up a few more rings and tried them out one by one. To his dismay, he found that regardless of the color of the rings, be it red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo or purple, all of them were of the fire type. Shea cried out in pain as he was burned. He felt as though he was on the verge of becoming barbecued meat. In the end, he heard Dora sigh and said, "I understand. I fear that the warehouse you found is a place where the gnomes specially store the fire-type fruit. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Shea gave a wry smile. Dora said, "Since you have figured out how to use the magic equipment created by the gnomes, why don't you try the 2 crystals you found on the sculpture and see what they are for?" Shea patted his head and immediately flipped over and took out a crystal from his bosom. This transparent crystal was only as thick as a little finger. Holding it in his hand, it was somewhat inconspicuous. Shea concentrated his mind, and just like how he normally unleashed his crimson killing intent, he concentrated his mental strength on this crystal bit by bit. Finally, the top of the crystal in his hand emitted a ray of light. With a swoosh, a beam of light shot out from the crystal. It was more than a meter long, close to 2 meters long. It was also a coincidence that when Shea pinched this crystal, the tip of the crystal happened to be facing his head. As a result, after this beam of light shot out, it almost sprayed directly onto Shea's forehead. Fortunately, Shea reacted quickly. In a moment of desperation, he quickly lowered his head and turned his wrist, moving the crystal away. Screech! Shea felt a chill on his scalp. Next, pieces of his hair fell off. It turned out that when the beam of light shot out, it easily cut off a piece of Shea's hair. Shea was stunned. He instinctively felt a sense of danger. Especially when the beam of light shot past his head, that instinctive sense of danger nearly caused him to be unable to stop himself from unleashing his crimson killing intent. Calming himself down, he held the crystal in his hand. "And I can't say that." At that moment, the item in Shea's hand looked like it looks like a sword? That's right, it did indeed look like a sword. The thin crystal was like the hilt of a sword, and the beam of light that shot out from the top was thin and long. It was only as thick as a person's thumb, and it shone with a white light that condensed together without dispersing. The length of the beam of light was about 1 meter, less than 2 meters. This beam of light did not emit any heat. However, on the surface of the beam of light, dazzling dots of light could be seen flashing continuously. Sword? Shea tried to hold the item in his hand. However, this sword hilt was too thin. Holding it in his hand was somewhat difficult. After all, it was only about the thickness of a little finger. He casually turned it around in his hand. Feeling curious, he took the sword of light and walked to the side of the iron essence gate. Then, he gently slashed it, noiselessly. A piece of the iron essence gate suddenly broke off at the spot where the light sword had slashed through. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. What a sharp item! Shea's face turned pale. It was so sharp that it could cut through iron essence, the hardest metal in the world, without making any sound. Even his flaming fork would not be able to do that. Shea suddenly had an idea. If he held the sword of light in his left hand and the flaming fork in his right hand, he would be able to see which one was sharper. However, he quickly dispelled the idea. What a joke! To be able to obtain such a good treasure was already a stroke of luck. If he were to accidentally damage any one of them, he would probably die from heartache. Shea's heart was filled with joy. This sword of light was so sharp that it was indeed a treasure. Although the sword hilt was somewhat thin, making it somewhat inconvenient to use, it was still an unparalleled sharp weapon. Feeling happy, he brandished the sword of light in his hand a few times. In the last few swings, he was unable to stop himself from unleashing the crimson killing intent with a whoosh. The beam of light on the sword of light suddenly became incomparably dazzling. Just after Xia unleashed his crimson killing intent and brandished his lightsaber, the air seemed to suddenly distort fiercely, as if something had been cut apart by the lightsaber. Xia also instinctively felt that something was wrong. He quickly stopped his hand and carefully looked at it. In the air in front of him, a thin white line appeared in front of him. The white line spread out bit by bit, and then a scene that made Xia flabbergasted appeared. The white line was like a, how should he put it? It was like a crack. Right. That's right, a crack. And this crack, there was actually something inside. It was white and foggy, and there was a faint blue light. There was also a glow. It only took a moment for the crack to slowly close up on its own. Xia stood there in a daze for a moment. Then, he suddenly jumped up fiercely. I understand now. Oh my God! I understand now. Xia stared with widened eyes at the sword of light in his hand. Earlier, within the crack, that white mist, blue light, that was the heavens. The heavens! The heavens outside! White clouds and blue sky. Since he had thought of this, the rest was not hard to guess. Earlier, that crack was space. With one slash, a crack had appeared in the space. This sword of light was actually able to cut open space. After guessing such a fact, Xia only felt his heart beating crazily. For a moment, his mouth was dry, and he was extremely excited. He even felt a little dizzy. Divine artifact. This was simply a divine artifact. Legend had it that only those with great strength could cut open space and time. And the sword of light in his hand, which was refined in ancient times, could actually cut open space so easily. If he thought about it a little more deeply, if he could make this crack bigger, wouldn't he be able to crawl through it? And then, teleportation. Divine artifact. In his mind, Dora also slowly spat out such a sentence. Such an unexpected huge gain made Xia scratch his head in joy. With this thing in his hand, he did not have to be afraid of being trapped in this underground cave. As long as he could cut open space and crawl out of the crack, haha. At that time, where could he not go in this vast world? In his excitement, he was distracted for a moment, and the beam of light on the light sword in his hand disappeared, returning to its original shape of a crystal. Xia was stunned at first, and then reacted. Yes, this thing is controlled by mental strength. As long as mental strength is injected, this magical sword of light can be triggered. You also have to consider the consumption of mental strength. Dora reminded. Because you have the effect of the crimson murderous aura, your mental strength is stronger. Perhaps, the stronger your mental strength, the more powerful the sword of light will be. I guess there must be something strange about this crystal. It can convert spiritual energy into a powerful force that can cut through space. There's one more. Xia immediately took out the other crystal and weighed it in his hand. Suddenly, he had an idea and put the two crystals together with a click. The two crystals, which already had a strong magnetic force, suddenly stuck together. In this way, the length of the two crystals doubled. Xia grabbed it, took a deep breath, and instantly raised his mental strength. With a whoosh, the two ends of the crystal in his hand emitted long flames at the same time. Aha! Double-edged on both ends. Haha, holding it in my hand like this, it's much more impressive than before. Xia held the double-edged sword of light in his hand and casually waved it a few times. Not daring to use it too much, He kept it. At least we have solved a big problem. If we want to leave this place, we can do so at any time. Shea laughed, but then his brows furrowed. But, I admit that this item is very powerful. Such a powerful weapon must be very precious. However, why would the ancient gnome general hide this item here? Wouldn't it be good to have such a powerful weapon by your side? Besides, our initial problem has yet to be solved in the end. Where is that god? We had originally guessed that this password-protected warehouse should contain clues to finding God. However, this sword of light does not seem to have anything to do with finding clues to God. Dora was silent for a moment. Then, she suddenly said in a strange tone, "I think we have found a clue. The clue is in your hands. This chapter is to make up for yesterday's skipping. I know it's too little, and my body is still in a bit of a bad state. Writing and smoking are torturous, causing me to cough non-stop. That's all for now. My body is slightly better now. Tomorrow I'll write more. I'm sorry, everyone. I solemnly apologize to everyone." To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 340. GOR Chapter 321 Final Message. The clue is in our hands? Shea pondered over Dora's words. After putting away the light sword, he held the two crystals and looked at them for a while. His tone was uncertain. "You mean to say, this thing is actually hinting that the god created by the goblins is no longer here?" "Actually, this is a very simple deduction," Dora quickly said. "The first time, the goblins used the magic array in the real god creation area to teleport this underground structure here. At that time, the god created by the goblins should have been sent here together with this magic array. Originally, the problem seemed to have reached a dead end. From the surface, the god created by the goblins should be here, in this place. Moreover, we walked from the top to the bottom, and from the bottom to the top. There is no entrance or exit here. Since there is no way in or out, how did the goblins and the god they created leave this place? I understand. The answer is this light sword." Shea sighed and looked down at the item in his hand. Since the goblins already have such a powerful invention, creating a small light sword that can cut through space, then perhaps they can also use this invention to create a large one that can transport many people and even the god out. Perhaps, in the final moment of crisis, the goblins tried to awaken their god but failed. In order to preserve their last hope, they used the huge magic array to teleport here. But then, for some reason, for example, they teleported again in order to shake off the enemy's pursuit. At any rate, since they can teleport once, maybe they can teleport a second time. How complicated. Shea rubbed his aching temples and sighed. "All right, then what do we do now? At any rate, I am not too interested in whether or not we can find the god of the goblins. If we can't find it, then forget it." After saying that, he turned back to look at the sculpture placed inside the warehouse. The young goblin girl was still standing there. Shea pondered for a moment before walking over. Then, he slowly pushed the sculpture aside. "Let's move it out first and see if there's any way to take it away. It's such a waste to leave such a good thing here." Although Shea said so, his movements were not slow. But just as he tried to push the sculpture out a little, he faintly heard a strange sound coming from the base of the sculpture, as if he had touched something. Shea immediately squatted down and looked at the pedestal for a while. Then, he cheered, "Ah! There's something down there." He reached his hand under the pedestal and felt a few grooves. Unfortunately, they were empty and there was nothing inside. Shea frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he slapped his head and placed the two crystals back into the groove under the pedestal. As expected, the size was exactly the same. However, there seemed to be more than two grooves below. Shea was overjoyed. Just as he stood up, he saw a green glow flash across the face of the sculpted gnome girl, following which, her eyes suddenly emitted light. The light shone upon the wall, and in an instant, it transformed into a strange image. Shea had never seen such a thing before, but, instinctively, he was shocked by the image on the wall. Alive. Living goblins were walking and talking. It was as though they were all alive. Don't be so shocked. This is just an illusion magic, Dora quickly said. You ignorant brat. This sculpture has the ability to save images. Hurry up and look at the image carefully. Shea took a few steps forward and stared at the image on the wall. The background of the image was very familiar. A gnome stood in the middle of the image, his eyes looking forward from this angle. It was as though this gnome was looking at Shea. This gnome appeared to have a more robust body. With the exception of Sky Attack, Shea had never seen such a robust gnome. Clearly, the physique of ancient gnomes was much stronger compared to modern gnomes. This gnome still had green skin, and its appearance was naturally very ugly by human standards. However, it was wearing a well-ironed shirt. The shirt appeared to be made of some kind of thick and hard material, and the buttons were fastened all the way up to the neck. It wore a pair of long black leather boots. Although it was very ugly, it appeared to be filled with a sense of strength and perseverance. The gnome's eyes stared intently at Shea. Then, it opened its mouth to speak. It was clearly speaking the gnome's language, and its expression was solemn and gloomy. Within its eyes, there was some sadness. However, there was even more determination and courage. It spoke very slowly, very softly, and also very long, but Shea couldn't understand a single word. Damn it! Dora, can you understand it? Dora's answer left Shea feeling helpless. I can only read some of the gnome's words. As for the pronunciation of their language, I don't know. You have to know. How many years has it been since ancient gnomes disappeared? Although some words have been passed down and the literal meaning of these words can be studied, the pronunciation has not been preserved. Moreover, the ancient gnomes' words are very different from the modern gnomes. At least, I am unable to study the pronunciation of the ancient gnomes' language. Shea was somewhat frustrated and annoyed. He could not help but slap his thigh and laugh bitterly. Damn it! This message must be very important, but we can't understand it. Damn God, aren't you playing with me? Probably because the goblin heard Shea's complaint, the scene suddenly changed. Then, the goblin in the picture seemed to be silent for a while, shook his head, and said something to the screen. After that, the picture stopped. After a few seconds, the scene started again. This time, the content of the scene was still the strong and determined gnome speaking alone. It was still speaking the gnome's language, which Shea could not understand. However, what made Shea so excited that he almost jumped up was, below the scene, there were actually lines of words. Ah! Look! There are words on it. Dora, read it out. What does it mean? Dora's voice quickly sounded in Shea's mind. That's right. It's the content of its words. God! What kind of advanced technology do these gnomes have? They can actually add these words into the magic illusion. Don't talk nonsense. Tell me, what did it say? Quick! Dora did not delay and quickly translated the gnome's words for Shea. I am Curiate, commander of the Eastern Garrison Corps of the Hardman Empire. My military rank is Major General of the Empire. Of course, that is if our empire still exists. This was the first sentence of the gnome in the scene. This sentence immediately made Shea so surprised that he almost cried out. Curiate, the author of the Gnome's Diary, the sad gnome's last general. I don't know if we still have hope, so I will record our experience in video. Perhaps this can leave a glimmer of hope for our civilization. I don't know what kind of people will see these things in the future. Goblins, elves, dragons, dwarves, giants, or humans. What I want to say is, if you are our kind, then please remember, preserve the fire of our civilization and continue the hope. If you are our enemy, then please also remember that we, the proud ones, have fought until the last moment. This is the 43rd day since the fall of the Creation God area. Just yesterday, the last gate of the Creation God area was attacked. As the current highest commander, I made my own decision to awaken our God. But unfortunately we failed. The Empire's hundreds of years of investment cannot be wasted. For this reason, I decided to start the Tinder plan. The 3 escape bunkers in the Creation God area are all released. This is our last hope. The teleportation of the escape bunkers is irreversible and cannot be retrieved. As the highest commander, I can only make a decision that is painful for me. Due to the limited space in the escape bunkers, most of the non-military personnel will not be able to enter the bunkers. I can only choose to keep our military personnel and abandon most of the non-military personnel. This is a painful decision. I know that I am an executioner. When I gave this order, my hands were already stained with the blood of my people. However, I do not regret it. I am willing to bear all the sins and punishments. May the fire of our civilization be continued. I am now in the number 1 escape bunker. The number 1 bunker is the largest and has the most space. However, a large number of our scientific and technological research results are preserved here, as well as our most important God. I personally selected a group of the most elite military personnel to take the number 1 bunker and transfer here. However, just now I received bad news. The No. 2 and number 3 bunkers have been destroyed. Because of that guy Amit, that cunning goblin, he had been a diplomat of the elves in my empire for many years. That damned spy had already secretly scouted out a large amount of confidential information and had grasped some information about the Creation God area. The teleportation location of the number 2 and number 3 bunkers has been grasped by him. Just before I recorded this message, our last communication with the number 2 and number 3 bunkers has confirmed that they have fallen. The teleportation location of the magic array has long been grasped by the elves. All the members of the number 2 bunker died in battle. The number 3 bunker was directly destroyed underground by the gnome. All the members died. I think that we here should be the last hope left. When Dora translated, her tone was very light. The gnome in the picture, its voice was low and sad. Shea also seemed to have some feelings in his heart and could not help but sigh softly. I have to make a decision again. According to the known situation, the teleportation location of the number 2 and number 3 bunkers has been grasped by the enemy and destroyed by them. Therefore, I have to worry whether the enemy has grasped the teleportation location of the number 1 bunker. Although the teleportation location of the number 1 bunker is the top secret of the entire Creation God area, I do not dare to take such a risk at this time. Therefore, I have decided to activate the emergency plan. In the number 1 bunker, there is a spare escape pod and a small teleportation formation. The energy stored is only enough for 1 use. I have decided that I cannot take the risk of staying here. Instead, I will use this small teleportation formation to transfer out again. However, I am once again faced with a painful decision. Because we have to take the Lord God away, the space of the small escape pod is limited. Now, the members in the number 1 bunker cannot all be transferred. I have to leave some of them behind. I will take most of the combat members and a small number of researchers with me. Just now, our brave clansmen have already drawn lots. A total of 744 brave gnomes have finally decided to stay here. And I have approved this order. I have to be the one to give the order again, to give an order that will kill our clansmen. Because the teleportation of the escape pod requires a large amount of energy, and after 1 teleportation, more than 90% of the energy here will be consumed. The remaining energy will not be able to maintain the life support system here. That is to say, the goblins that remain here will have no clean water to drink or food to eat for a short period of time after we teleport away. Furthermore, because we are in a completely sealed location hundreds of meters underground, they will have no chance of leaving on their own. Once we leave, the gnomes who stay behind will have to face only one thing. That is death. I leave behind this message to tell the future generations, if you are one of our clansmen, I hope you will know what kind of sacrifices your ancestors made in order to preserve the kindling of our clan. If you are our enemy, I want you to understand that the proud gnomes fought until the very last moment. We never gave up. After saying that, Shea, who was looking at the image, was moved. When he had first read the diary, Shea had been deeply shocked. However, the diary was just words after all. Words alone were far from being able to directly express the shock. But now the author of the diary was right before his eyes. It was as though he had traveled through thousands of years and was standing right before Shea's eyes, alive and well. With that solemn, desolate, and unyielding tone, with that seemingly calm but resolute voice, he slowly spoke of his final longing for hope. Shea suddenly felt a trace of sourness in his heart. He subconsciously clenched his fist. I'm about to set out, leading our last army and protecting our main god as he retreats. I hope we can reach a safe place and successfully awaken our main god, to spread the kindling of our clan once more. I firmly believe, intelligent and wise gnomes, that our civilization won't go extinct just like that. I also firmly believe that our sacrifice will be rewarded. Shea sighed. On the screen, Major General Curiet's words were resolute and firm. But Shea was very clear that in the end, he failed. Because Shea saw with his own eyes that Major General Curiet and his subordinates who had managed to escape had all died in that valley. And the kindling of their civilization that they had sacrificed themselves to protect had not been able to spread. Today, thousands of years later, the intelligent and powerful gnomes had been reduced to the dirtiest and lowest class of all life in this world. There are a total of 3 keys to the main god. I took one of them away and left the remaining 2 here. Viewer, since you can see these images, you must have found the 2 keys. If I fail, then you, who hope to find the keys, if you are my kin, please bear the hope of sowing the kindling of the fire. If you are my enemy, then the keys you get will bring you bad luck. Gnomes will not surrender, nor will they yield. Keys? Could it be these 2 crystals? May the main god bless us, if it really exists, if it really is a god. These were the last words of Goblin Major General Curiet. After this sentence, the image quickly disappeared. After a moment of silence, Dora said softly, "Well, most of the questions have been answered. But the last question is, this Major General Curiet left with the main god and used the last escape pod to teleport away. But I still don't understand. They had already run here, so why did they return to the forest from here after escaping? Why did they return to a place so close to the creation god area?" Shea said with a wry smile, "You ask me, but who am I going to ask?" After the image disappeared, Shea lifted the base of the sculpture and took out the 2 crystals again. It's strange. These 2 things can turn into light swords and cut through space. Can't they escape? Why does this message say that there are still some gnomes left here waiting to die? Humph, nonsense. Do you think everyone has your strong mental strength to use such things? Although these things are powerful, they can only be effective in the hands of people with strong mental strength. Shea thought for a moment. Since Curiet said that these 2 crystals are keys to the main god, then could it be that there are some clues hidden in them? For example, where did they hide the main god? As Shea was pondering, he suddenly heard a movement behind him. Wu Ran turned around and saw a person standing under the hole in the middle of this layer of space. Hastings had walked up from below at an unknown time and stood beside the hole. There was a strange and complicated expression on his face as he looked at Shea with a faint smile. "Little fellow, it seems you have made a lot of discoveries." The corners of Hastings' eyes twitched. He immediately saw the sculpture placed there and asked, "What is this?" "It is just a sculpture." Shea laughed and said, "Take a look, isn't it valuable?" "Unfortunately, the expression and tone of your lie are not bad." Hastings shook his head and said, "However, you cannot fool me." Hastings slowly walked over and stared at Shea. "Tell me, what did you find?" Requesting votes. I need monthly votes and recommendation votes. Please check if you have any votes in your account. If you do, please help me out. Thank you very much. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 341. Geor Chapter 322. This is going to be rich. Hastings's gaze was as sharp as a knife. Under such a gaze, Shea could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. Gradually, an uneasy expression appeared on his face. Hastings's face gradually turned gloomy. "Just what did you find?" "Nothing." Shea forced himself to shake his head. These two crystals were definitely treasures on par with divine artifacts. Since they had fallen into Sir Shea's hands, how could a country bumpkin like him casually hand them over? "Nothing? There is really nothing. What are you panicking for?" Hastings narrowed his eyes. Shea braced himself and straightened his neck. He shouted, "Nonsense! Old man, you are staring at me with such malicious intent. It is only natural for me to feel nervous. Your eyes are filled with murderous intent, like a tiger staring at its prey. If it were anyone else, they would feel a chill run down their spine." After saying that, he clapped his hands. "This place is only so big and I don't have much baggage on me. You don't really think that I found that God, do you? Tell me, if I really did find God, where could I hide it? Could it be in a *** hole?" Hastings was stunned by Shea's shameless words. He carefully stared at Shea for a moment. Then, he gave a harumph and did not ask anything else. Instead, he slowly walked to the side of the sculpture and looked at it. Hastings stared at the crystal sculpture of the gnome girl for a long time. During that time, Shea's heart kept pounding. He did not know when Hastings had come up. At that moment, he could only hope that Hastings had not seen the image, and that he had not seen him pulling out the two crystals from the base of the sculpture and putting them into his bosom. Thankfully, Hastings had walked around the sculpture several times. Looking at it from head to toe, he did not find anything out of the ordinary. After all, the sculpture was originally a hole. The two crystals from before were superfluous. That was why the attentive Shea was able to see through them. At this moment, without the two crystals, the statue became even more perfect. There were no longer any flaws or holes. Hastings looked at it for a long time, but he couldn't figure out anything. He even tried to reach out and knock on a few parts of the sculpture to listen carefully, afraid that there might be a hidden compartment inside. He even carefully injected a wisp of faint black flames into the sculpture, as if he was trying to see if there were any magical waves inside. But it was all in vain. The level of magic of the ancient gnomes was very mysterious. Although there was a hidden image in the sculpture, this kind of magic was hidden very deeply. Hastings's probing didn't have any result. In the end, although Hastings still had some doubts about Shea, he couldn't find any evidence. There were a lot of things in his backpack, such as muscle fruit, battle tree fortress, all kinds of magic fruits, and so on. And the crystal that was only the thickness of 2 fingers was really not very eye-catching. Since Hastings didn't notice anything, he simply ignored Shea. He walked around this floor again and said, "Since I can't find anything, I might as well leave." "You didn't find anything down there?" Shea asked. Hastings shook his head. In fact, Hastings had wasted a lot of time in the cave below. He had copied almost every seal on the wall, the pit of the scorpion, and the pattern of the magic circle. He was going to find someone to study it when he went back. He even brought back 2 pieces of the scorpion's shell. But other than that, Hastings didn't have any other gains. All in all, Hastings's mood was somewhat down. After all, he didn't find what he was looking for. It was inevitable that he would feel disappointed. Then, he turned to look at Shea. He saw Shea sitting there, tying up the large bag again and again. Hastings looked at Shea and the smile on his face gradually became somewhat odd. "What are you doing?" "Packing up and getting ready to leave." Shea raised his head. "You found the exit?" Hastings's answer caused Shea's heart to jump. He stared at Hastings and said, "What do you mean by that?" Hastings shook his head and said, "Are we enemies?" "Yes." Hastings asked again, "Do you still want to kill me?" Shea nodded. Then, in the face of an enemy who wants to kill me, do you think it is necessary for me to bring you along to save you?" Shea sneered inwardly. However, his face revealed a look of anger as he said, "Hey! Did you forget your oath? I still have 2 more times." "If it is 2 times, I will spare your life," Hastings said coolly. "As long as I don't kill you, it will be fine. But if you die here, and not by my hands, then don't blame me for what happens next. The oath states that I will spare your life 3 times. However, if you do not die by my hands and instead die for some other reason, then, if I stand aside and watch you die, it will not be a violation of the oath." Shea sneered and did his best to put on a look of anger. "I knew you were not that kind. Don't worry, I won't let you die here." Hastings smiled. Then, his face turned serious. "I will ask you one more time. That night I asked you in the forest, are you willing to reconsider? As long as you are willing to pledge allegiance to me and assist me in the future, you will be my junior brother. Naturally, I will take good care of you." Shea laughed and did not say anything. He simply rolled his eyes. That was his answer. "It seems you are still unwilling," Hastings said. "All right, I will not kill you. However, I have changed my mind. I do not want to take you away from here. As I said before, I want to keep you by my side, keep an eye on you and control you so that in the future, that prophecy Now that I have seen this place, I suddenly thought of something. Is there a better place to imprison someone than this place? Even if I leave you here and imprison you here, I will not kill you. However, you will not be able to get out. If so, that prophecy will probably not happen. Hey! If you leave me here, I will also starve to death," Shea retorted. You can eat the scorpion meat." Hastings's answer caused Shea to become enraged. "The scorpion meat is enough for you to eat for quite some time. As for water, there is also a canal outside this place. You can just stay here and be at ease. Don't worry, I said I won't kill you and I won't kill you. I will just imprison you here. Every once in a while, I will come to check on you and give you some food so that you will not starve to death." The more Hastings said, the more satisfied he became. It was as though he was very proud of his arrangement. "Tell me, isn't this a way to get the best of both worlds?" Shea was speechless. It did not take long for Hastings to break through the ceiling of this layer of the cavern. Then, he brought Shea back to the circular cavern that the 2 of them had first entered. There was also a water trough inside the cavern. Beneath the water trough was the deep underground canal that the 2 of them had used to enter this place. Hastings looked at Shea and smiled. "You destroyed the elevator room. However, I have done my best for you and helped you break through the cavern. This way, you can come here and drink from this water trough. You will not die of thirst. Shea, there is one more thing I want to tell you." He pointed at the water trough. "The only way in and out of this place is through the underground canal. Given your present level of strength, it is impossible for you to travel underwater for such a long time. However, there is water to drink and food to eat here. You can cultivate here. After some time, if your strength advances by leaps and bounds, perhaps one day, you will have the ability to pass through the underground canal. Then, you will be able to escape. After saying that, Hastings laughed and patted Shea's shoulder. Next, he jumped into the water trough and disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Given Hastings's ability and the strength of a powerful expert, he could easily control everything in nature, including water. Naturally, he would be able to easily pass through the underground canal. After Hastings jumped into the water, Shea stood on the shore and watched for a moment. He even stuck his head into the water to check for a moment. After confirming that Hastings had truly left, Shea retracted his head back. He wiped his face and spat out a mouthful of saliva. Then, he smiled and scolded, "Aha! Hastings, oh Hastings! No matter how smart you are, you will still fall for this Lord Shea's trick. You want to lock Lao Tzu up here? Lao Tzu naturally has a way to walk out of here. You want to lock me up? In your next life." After saying that, Shea snorted. Then, he turned around and walked into the cave, directly jumping to the next floor. After returning to the first floor of the warehouse, Shea was much more relaxed this time. Hastings had already left. In such a big place, he was the only one left. It was just the right time to plunder the many warehouses left behind by the ancient gnomes. Without Hastings, this powerful enemy, by his side, Shea finally felt carefree. He was so happy that he even hummed a little tune. First, he took out 2 crystals. Then, he moved the sculpture and thought for a moment. There were 3 grooves under the sculpture, but there were only 2 crystals. Thinking about it, there were a total of 3 crystals. But since 2 crystals were enough to activate the sculpture's magic, would 1 crystal work as well? Thinking of this, Shea subconsciously gave it a try. He only inserted 1 crystal into the groove and kept the other in his bosom. Sure enough, Shea's guess was right. After inserting only 1 crystal, the statue quickly lit up. Then, it played the last message left by the gnome Major General Curiot. Shea read the message 3 times. After carefully studying almost every detail and confirming that there were no suspicious points or omissions, he finally gave up. He began to inspect the warehouses. He pushed the turntable in the middle, again and again, according to the secrets of the warehouses he knew. Number 1, Number 1, Number 11, Number 12, Number 13. Lao Tzu is rich. After opening 3 warehouses in a row, Shea found that they were full of magic crystals and gems. Although the mana of these magical crystals had been exhausted, and they had become ordinary crystals and gems, they were still very valuable in the secular world even though they no longer had any magical value. Shea became more and more annoyed. He was annoyed that he didn't have a storage space for magic equipment. He looked at the mountains of gold and silver in front of him, but he didn't have the ability to move them away. He opened a few more warehouses. This time, the harvest wasn't too rich. Some of the warehouses had already been emptied. There were also some warehouses with some magic cannons and other weapons, but the magic crystals had been exhausted. Without energy, these things were just a pile of metal. Shea frantically opened one warehouse after another. Finally, when he reached the 22nd warehouse, Shea cheered. After the door was opened, there was obviously magic equipment stored here. There were a total of 7 polished gemstones. They were as wide and flat as a book. They looked like miniature tablets. The 7 gems were made of pure gems. They were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple respectively. The most important thing was that these gems were still emitting the light of magic. Obviously, the magic power had been stored and hadn't been exhausted. Shea's biggest hope now was to find a storage space magic equipment here, so that he could complete his big move. Seeing that he had finally found a few magic equipment, and they still had magic power, how could he not be happy? He cheered and pounced forward, hugging one of the red gems. He held it up with both hands and looked at the goblin characters engraved on it. "What is written on it?" Dora frowned and said, "Strange. It says, Dragon Race." Dragon Race? Shea stared blankly. The goblin characters engraved on it only have the word dragon race written on it? It is the dragon race. Dora's tone was somewhat puzzled. Strange, why engrave the word dragon race on a gem? Shea grabbed another green gem. What about this one? What is written on it? Oh. Dora answered Shea's question. Shea's heart suddenly skipped a beat and he quickly grabbed the third gem slab. What about this orange one? It is the human race. The goblin characters on it mean human race. Shea smiled and said, so these 7 gem slabs are categorized according to race? What is this? Why don't you try it out yourself? I think that the magic equipment made by the goblins should be similar. They can all be opened using mental power. After all, the goblins are not a magical race. The magic equipment they make is for those who don't know magic. Shea nodded and picked up the red gem slab on the top. He held the translucent gem slab in his hand and focused his attention. Then, he focused all of his mental power on the gem slab in his hand. The gem slab that was originally just flowing with a faint luster suddenly emitted a brilliant red light. Following the emergence of this warm light, a mist-like thing suddenly appeared on the surface of the gem slab. As the mist quickly dissipated, lines of text appeared. Although it was in the goblin language, Dora quickly translated it. According to our statistics, the dragon race is the race with the highest level of strength among all the races in this world. They have outstanding magical talent and outstanding physical strength. At the same time, they have achieved a near-perfect balance between the two. In accordance with the efforts of the Creation God Area's Centennial Plan, we have conducted in-depth research on this race and successfully obtained a part of this race's skills. As a research subject, we have recorded these skills here, so that future generations could use it for research purposes. Dragon Race Skills Category. First record. Scale Armor. Note: this skill is the basic ability of most of the dragon race. Adult dragons can use it by chanting the dragon magic incantation with the innate dragon language. The scales on the body can instantly become as hard as metal. Because the dragon language incantation is too complicated, and other races other than the dragon race are unable to use this incantation due to the different structure. Therefore, based on the unremitting efforts of several generations of colleagues, we have finally overcome this difficulty. According to our detailed analysis of the dragon language incantation, the role of each note has been compared and analyzed. Finally, we have saved and optimized it. The recombined scale armor can exert 70% of the dragon race's effect. At the same time, the incantation has been improved into simpler note. The recorded incantation is as follows: XXXXX. Shea was stunned. Second skill: Dragon Wing Wind Slash. Wind dragons are proficient in skills. It is also one of the exclusive dragon curse spells of the dragon race. Its power is evaluated as level 2. After optimization, the recombined Dragon Wing Wind Slash can exert 50% of the dragon race's original magic effect. The incantation has been improved to more than 40%. Evaluation: impractical. The recorded incantation is as follows: XXXXX. Third skill: Dark Flame Summoning. A special skill of the Black Dragon race, Dark Flame Summoning. It has the dark attribute and can add a panic effect. It also has the ability to resist light magic. It has a corrosive effect on physical attack. Incantation. Analysis. Optimization. The recorded incantation is as follows: XXXXX. Seeing this, Shea could no longer hold it in. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Shea hugged the gem book tightly and jumped crazily on the spot. Secret manual. It's definitely a secret manual. Shea could only feel his saliva dripping down. This book actually recorded the ultimate skills of the dragon race. and the mysterious ancient gnomes used a mysterious method to transform the ultimate skills that only the dragon race could use into something that even gnomes who didn't know magic could use. I'm rich. I'm rich. Lao Tzu is rich. Ha 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 ha! Today, I went to the hospital for a comprehensive physical examination. After seeing the results, I realized that my body is really weak. Haha, I need to train. I need to train, to be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 342. Requesting recommendation votes for support, requesting monthly votes for support. GOR Chapter 323. There are gains and losses. Shea laughed like a madman. He was so happy that his mouth almost reached his ears. The excitement in his heart was overflowing with words. He felt that with these few gemstone tablets in his hand, he could grasp all the skills of the major races. Whatever he wanted to learn, he could learn it. What dragon curse magic of the dragon clan? What elven secret magic? What nature magic? What forbidden magic? To him, they were no longer secrets. For the first time, Shea felt that the ancient gnomes were so cute. This discovery was 10 times greater than all his previous gains. The most important thing was that the ancient gnomes had used their extraordinary wisdom to transform all these skills and mysteries. Even if they did not know magic, they could still learn and use them. This point in particular was simply too suitable for Shea. As long as he worked hard to learn all the skills recorded on these tablets, wouldn't he be able to master all kinds of skills from various races in the future? Damn it, even if he could not run amok under the heavens, he could still dominate a region, right? When the time comes, he would impart some skills to his subordinate. And, when the time comes, he would form an elite army. Everyone would practice the Dragon Clan's combat skills. Wouldn't that be equivalent to having an elite army of humanoid dragon warriors? If he could recruit a group of subordinates to specialize in learning the nature magic of the Elven clan, damn it, his personal mage guard. Even the Emperor would not have such extravagance. When the time comes, what Black Flag army? What Scarlet Snow army? None of them could enter his heart. Shea's wild laughter lasted for almost a quarter of an hour. He laughed until his mouth was crooked and his eyes were slanted. Finally, he gradually calmed down. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth. However, he heard Dora's sneering voice in his mind. "Are you done laughing?" Humph, Shea knew that he had somewhat lost his composure. However, he did not care. So what if he lost his composure? Lao Tzu was not like Hastings, who liked to keep a straight face no matter what mood he was in. This was Sir's true nature. If he did not laugh when he was happy, should he cry? Always keeping a straight face, acting as if everyone owed him tens of thousands of gold coins. Aha, Shea, do not have that kind of interest. What's wrong? I am happy. Can't I laugh a little longer? I am just curious. What is there to be happy about? Hearing you laugh so proudly, as if you have already become a powerhouse. Even if I cannot become a powerhouse, I am not too far away. Shea lightly flicked his finger on the stone slab in his hand and said with a smile, "With these few things, the unique skills of various races are recorded inside. Humph. The most important thing is that there are no restrictions when training. It was possible to cultivate without knowing magic. Shouldn't I be happy about such a good thing?" When Dora heard this, she let out a long sigh. Sigh, a stupid kid will always be a stupid kid. It's no wonder that you suddenly obtained such a huge amount of treasure. It's normal for you to lose your composure and get carried away, forgetting the most important thing. Sigh. Shea frowned. You're sighing to the left and to the right. You're making my hair stand on end. It's such a joyous occasion, why are you acting as if someone has died? Dora sneered. I am sighing because I am afraid you will be happy for nothing again." Shea was stunned. He jumped up and exclaimed, "What did you say?" Dora said in a serious tone, "I said, you will be happy for nothing again. Because you will not be able to learn these skills." "Why?" Shea immediately turned pale with fright. What do you mean by that? Are you not going to teach me?" You don't want to see me become stronger? Only you can read the gnome language on this, so you..." "Idiot." Dora sounded a little disappointed. "I thought that even though you usually pretend to be reckless, you're actually very smart on the inside. But now it seems that you have a big problem. You get carried away when you are pleased. When did I say that I am not willing to teach you? I need you to bring me back to the holy tomb. If you can become stronger, it will be good for me too." "Then, why is that?" Dora's tone was a little disdainful. "Okay, let me ask you. Based on the dragon curse magic on the first stone slab, I am a dragon and I know a lot of dragon curse magic. I can teach you, but why can't I?" Shea said without hesitation. "Isn't that simple? Dragon curse magic requires chanting the incantation in the dragon language. But only dragons can speak the dragon language. Because the structure of the species is different, many of the sounds in the dragon language can only be spoken by dragons. The other races can't make those sounds. That is the first thing. And the second thing is because only dragons can cultivate dragon curse magic. Only dragons have this kind of magic talent. I don't have it, so... Then why are you so happy to have this stone slab? Are you asking a question you already know the answer to? Naturally, it is because those clever and cute goblins of the ancient times had researched and improved these magic. Even the goblins who don't know magic can cultivate it. So, I, a human who also doesn't know magic, can cultivate it. And the second thing is that the incantations are no longer those complicated and unspeakable dragon language sounds. Instead, ah. After saying that, Shea's face suddenly changed. His complexion instantly collapsed. His face was originally flushed red, but now it had suddenly turned ashen, as if just like a dead person. After being tongue-tied for a while, Shea finally recovered his strength. He let out a long sigh and sat down on the ground. He forcefully slapped his thigh and said with a wry smile, "I understand, ha! What a good full moon gazing in the water. Ha ha! Can see, can't touch, can't eat, damn it, isn't this torture?" After all, Shea was not an idiot. He was just too excited that he became hot-headed. After Dora's reminder, he finally realized that he had been happy too early. The key? The key was the pronunciation. Indeed, after the ancient goblins improved the original dragon curse magic, they even improved the dragon language incantations into sounds that the goblins could pronounce. It was modified using the goblin language. In other words, from the dragon language version, it was changed to the goblin language version. This way, the goblins could cultivate as well. But the problem is, Shea can't speak the draconic language because the dragon's mouth, nose, and even body structure is different from other races. There are many sounds in the draconic language, and there are even dozens or hundreds of strange changes in the draconic language, which other creatures can't do. But Shea could not speak the dragon language. But if it was changed to the goblin language, would he be able to speak it? The answer was no. Maybe the goblin language was not hard to learn. Maybe humans could also pronounce the goblin language. But the problem was, even if Shea wanted to learn, where could he learn it? Dora could speak the ancient goblin language, but she could only read it. She could not speak it. It was a line of gnome text. Dora could decipher the meaning of these words. But Dora did not know how to pronounce the words. How could she use her voice to read it? But the problem was, in order to cast magic, she had to chant the incantation loudly. In this day and age, there were very few people who could recognize the ancient goblin language. Shea had only met a few people like Dora, Darwin, and Hastings. But these fellows only knew how to recognize the meaning and could not speak it, because the ancient goblin civilization had been extinct for tens of thousands of years. The meaning of the words could be analyzed through research, but the pronunciation, there was no way to study it. Magic incantations had extremely strict requirements for the pronunciation of the incantation. Even if the pronunciation was wrong, the magic would not be able to be cast. Not to mention, Shea did not know how to pronounce a wrong note. He did not even know how to pronounce a single word. Not only the magic of the dragon race, there were also the magic of other races, the magic of the elf race, and so on. Although the ancient goblins had improved and converted the magic of these races into a simpler version of the ancient goblin language, but to Shea, this improvement was practically useless. Who knew how many tens of thousands of years had passed? Where was Shea going to find someone who could speak the ancient goblin language? Shea's mood suddenly became very depressed. The sudden ups and downs obviously affected the country bumpkin's mood. He sat there holding his head and thought for a while. Finally, he opened his eyes and a flame of hope reappeared in his eyes. I don't believe that there is no harvest at all. There are so many stone tablets, there must be something useful. He became more and more excited as he spoke. Magic can't be used, but martial arts don't require incantations. Soon, Shea flipped through the stone tablets again and checked them one by one. The skills of the dragon race. Most of them were related to the dragon race's magic. Without the foundation of magic, the dragon race's skills were basically unusable and there were a few that were related to martial arts. But the dragon spear battle technique and the like all required the powerful strength of the dragon race as a foundation. It did not seem very practical for him. He flipped to the dwarf race. There were some records of the special skills of the dwarf race, the talent to identify minerals. Unfortunately, this innate ability of the dwarf race had been perfectly replicated by the goblins using magic. But Shea still could not use it, because this magic was still in the goblin language. Other than that, there was also a set of martial arts of the dwarf race's war god hammer. There were a lot of records. Shea secretly remembered them. The situation of the elf race was similar to that of the dragon race. The elf race was one of the few races that could perfectly integrate magic and martial arts. Most of their skills were a combination of magic and martial art. If magic could not be used, then it was impossible to cultivate. But Shea also found some useful skills. In particular, there was another powerful skill of the elf race: archery. In addition, there were several sets of movement skills used by the elf race. In actual combat, it could make one's speed and movement skills faster and lighter. But the name made Shea hesitate for a while. Butterfly dance steps? Damn, I am such a dignified man, yet I actually have to do some awkward butterfly dance steps? There was also something like the giant race. There were even fewer records. The giant race used earth magic as a foundation to display great power. Alas, Shea could not use anything that required a foundation of magic. Finally, Shea looked at the slate that recorded the human race. Shea had the greatest expectations for the skills of the human race. After all, he was a human. Perhaps there would be more skills that were suitable for him, but with one look, Shea was completely disappointed. There were very few records of the human race's skills. It even seemed that the ancient gnomes did not have a high evaluation of the human race. Whether it was in terms of physical strength or magical talent, the human race was the weakest among all races, second only to the gnomes themselves. In terms of physical strength, the human race could not compare to the dragon race, the dwarf race, the giant race. Even the elf race was much worse. At least the elf race far surpassed the human race in terms of speed and agility. As for magical talent, needless to say, it was also in the bottom ranks. It seemed that the gnomes thought that the human race's strongest point was their strong reproductive ability. Damn it. Shea was a little annoyed. In the records, there were only a few battle chi skills recorded among the human race. But Shea had already cultivated the crimson murderous aura, so battle chi skills did not seem to be of much use to him. As for the other skills, there were 2 sets of sword skills and 1 set of spear skills. Without carefully studying them, Shea was not sure how powerful these skills were. Since it was passed down from ancient times, he hoped that it would not be too bad. Looking at the current situation, it seemed that the most practical use for him was the elf race's archery skills. The more Shea looked, the more depressed he became. Finally, he put down the stone slab and whispered, "Sigh, empty like a treasure mountain, empty like a treasure mountain. Such a big pile of treasures in front of me, but I can't touch it. If only there was someone in this world who could speak the ancient gnome language." Even if there was only one person who could speak the ancient gnome language, Shea would definitely make up his mind to learn it. No matter how big the price he had to pay, he had to learn it. Even if there was only one. Shea pondered for a long time. Can speak, Shea sat there, looking around blankly. Suddenly, his heart jumped. His eyes saw something. It was the sculpture that was placed not far away. The ancient gnome girl, Princess Lulu's sculpture. Aha! Shea jumped up and shouted, "I remember now! Who said that there was no one in this world who could speak the ancient gnome language? Isn't there one in front of me?" "Who?" Dora asked. Shea pointed at the sculpture. "In that video, wasn't there the ancient gnome language?" "His Excellency Major General Kuriak." Ha 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 ha. Dora also seemed to understand Shea's meaning. "That's right. I'm afraid that this message is the only preserved record of the ancient goblin language in the world. But there's only this recording. As long as you have perseverance, you can slowly learn and research." Shea smiled. "I'm not greedy. As long as I can learn 10% of the ancient gnome language, or even 1%, with so many magic spells, as long as I can research 3 to 5 of them, I'll have made a big profit." It had to be said that this was a very stupid method, and the hope was slim. But at present it seemed that this was the only way. Then, Shea felt that his luck was finally turning. After opening more than 30 warehouses, Shea finally found something he had been dreaming of. A portable storage and transportation tool? Looking at the gnome language on it and Dora's translation, Shea immediately became excited. A portable storage and transportation tool. Obviously, this was something that would exhaust spatial magic equipment. In fact, it was not much different from Shea's guess. This thing was indeed what Shea was looking for. But this thing, is it really portable? Looking at the object in front of him, Shea was stunned. Usually, he heard that the spatial magic equipment in the legends were very small and beautiful. For example, the spatial magic ring could be worn on the finger. When needed, things could be stored or summoned at any time. It was beautiful and elegant. Another example was Merlin's sleeve. It was as if anything could be taken out from her sleeve. It was extremely flashy. But this thing in front of him, Dora, what do you think this thing looks like? I think it looks like, all right. Behind the open door in front of him was this object. At least from its appearance, it did not have much of a portable feel to it. There were 4 round metal wheels, clearly made of iron. The wheels were about the height of Shea's waist. And on top of the wheels was a big box. Or it looked like a small house? There were 2 long axles extending out from the front. I feel that. Why does this thing look so much like a big car? The carriage on top is bigger than the ones I have seen before. Shea muttered to himself and his face suddenly changed. Damn it. This was basically a huge carriage. No wonder it looked so familiar. Walking to the side of the carriage door, Shea saw that there was a knob on the door. Shea was all too familiar with this knob made of gnome essence. After experimenting a few times, he quickly figured out how to use this knob. Although there was only one carriage, it was clearly a magic equipment. The only difference between it and other magic equipment was that it did not require magic power to operate. Instead, it could be operated using mental power. After some exploration, Shea found that there were more than 10 storage spaces inside. Each of them was as big as the carriage. To open up a storage space, all he needed to do was to turn the knob. Shea was already familiar with this kind of operation. Requesting votes to be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 343. Have a good weekend. I hope you all can have a good weekend. GOR Chapter 324. The Unlucky Island. At the same time, there were some drawbacks to this item. Those were clearly written on the metal sign hanging beside the vehicle. In particular, in order to maintain this space, the vehicle must have sufficient energy. As for the energy, it came from the 10 magic crystals stored under the base of the vehicle. Once the magic crystals were exhausted, the vehicle could no longer be opened. Well, at least it is something useful. After the initial helplessness, Shea quickly became happy. After determining that the magic crystals at the base of the vehicle still had enough magic power, he stuffed most of the looted items into the vehicle. At any rate, there were more than 10 storage units. It was enough to store everything. Then, should we consider leaving this place next? Shea smiled and said, after plundering everything, next, we will split open space and leave. Shea was in a good mood. Without the threat of that powerful enemy Hastings by his side, he was able to plunder so many spoils of war. This was a rewarding trip. Humph, that old bastard Hastings wants to lock me up here? When Lao Tzu gets out and meets him in the future, he will surely be so shocked that his eyeballs will pop out. After considering that, Shea frowned and shook his head. No. That old bastard is too powerful. I am no match for him. Even if I don't provoke him, if Hastings finds out that I escaped from this underground cavern, he will likely come after me. The strength of the strong is not something that I can challenge right now. Sigh, after thinking about it, it seems that among all the people I know, the only one who has the ability to deal with Hastings and protect me at the same time, it seems, only that powerful woman, Merlin. Merlin, when the time comes, I can only put down my pride and ask Merlin for help. Sigh, Hastings is the old man's apprentice while Merlin is his lover. With this layer of relationship, I don't think Hastings would dare to challenge Merlin. Island was just a young farmer in the countryside. He was neither honest nor hard-working, but he was a little lazy. In the past, people in the village used to call him Lazy Island or Useless Island. The few plots of land that his father had passed down to him were originally the best in the village. However, due to Alante's tiredness and disliking for farm work, his land had been reduced by half in just a few years. The half that had been lost had been sold to the rich families in the village, and all the money had been turned into wine and went into his stomach. In fact, Irante knew that he was not stupid. He always thought that he was smarter than the farmers in the village who only knew how to dig for food. Ever since he was 10 years old, when a bard passed by the village and told him a few stories, the young Irante already had his own dream in life. He did not belong to this remote and mediocre village. He should belong to the outside world, the vast and wonderful world outside. At the same time, it should be said that Island was quite popular with the girls in the village. He was already 20 years old and strong, but because he rarely worked in the wind and sun, he had a fair and clean face. He also had a glib tongue. Usually, girls liked boys who had a glib tongue. For example, the most beautiful girl in the village, the daughter of the village chief, liked to sneak glances at Island during the village meeting. Island also liked to boast about some wonderful stories of the outside world to everyone. Stories of legendary warriors slaying dragons, stories of demon hunters capturing ferocious magical beasts, and so on. Of course, the girls liked to hear the love stories of noble ladies and brave knight the most. Therefore, Island was very popular with the girls. He was not like the other honest young farmers in the village. For example, Jack at the head of the village also liked the village head's daughter, but every time he would only pull the village head's daughter and repeatedly tell her about how he trained 2 horses. It was undeniable that Island was born with the talent of an opportunist. That talent was especially apparent a few months ago. A few months ago, Lord Green of Denzel City in Morrell County gave the order to scorch the land. A small group of soldiers from the county garrison came to the village and gathered everyone. They gave the order to burn down the farmlands and fill up the wells. After that, they ordered the villagers to immediately abandon their homes and move to Denzel City. Although it was stated in the order that the prefectural governor would compensate everyone for their losses, the prefectural governor was still not satisfied. However, back then, Island had kept an eye on things. In his opinion, abandoning his home was not a big deal. At any rate, the few plots of land he owned had long since become barren. However, he did not want to follow them to Denzel City. He felt that there would be no future for him if he were to follow the soldiers to Denzel City like a refugee. He remembered when he was 10 years old, the bard who passed by the village had said, "Heroes emerge in troubled times." Whether or not he was a hero was something that Island was uncertain about. However, he could understand the meaning behind the words. Whenever the world is in chaos, there will be plenty of opportunities. As long as those who are smart can seize those opportunities, they will be able to make a name for themselves. Thus, Island decided not to follow the others. He quietly slipped away from the group and hid himself in the wilderness of the forest. Even though he wasn't sure what his future plans were, he still didn't know. However, the lack of a plan did not mean that he had no fantasies. Based on the stories that he had heard in the past, Island came up with several ideal ways out for himself. Perhaps I will encounter an imperial army. Then, I will join the army. Relying on my heroic performance, I will be able to perform meritorious deeds and receive generous rewards. After that, I will be promoted and become a high-ranking official heir. However, I do not seem to be suited for war. Island was aware of his own situation. Although he was tall and strong, he could not be considered a brave person. Forget about going to the battlefield. Even if he were to fight with the other youngsters in the village, he would always be the weaker party. If so, perhaps it would be like the legends. Perhaps I will enter the depths of the mountains and accidentally encounter an expert who lives in seclusion. Then, the expert will impart to me a mystical ability. Perhaps the other party will be a high-ranking warrior or a great magician. Then, I will bring along my mystical abilities and make a name for myself, or perhaps, I will accidentally save a beautiful noble lady who got lost in the midst of a calamity and form a beautiful relationship with her. Then, it would be best if the noble lady's family died in the chaos of war. Then, I can marry her and obtain both wealth and beauty, or perhaps, sigh, I cannot think about it anymore. My stomach is growling again. Island helplessly turned over and jumped down from the treetop. He rubbed his rumbling stomach and looked around. He had been in this forest for nearly 3 months. Every day, he would wander around the nearby roads to try his luck. Unfortunately, he did not find anything. There were no beautiful noble ladies who had fallen into misfortune, nor were there any experts who lived in seclusion. There were a few times when he was almost discovered by Odin's scouting reindeer cavalry. If not for the fact that he was a local and was familiar with the terrain and could run fast, he would have lost his life long ago. The reason why Island was able to survive alone for so long was due to a secret he had. In a secluded place behind the village there was a cave. That place was Island's secret warehouse. He had hidden a considerable portion of his fortune in that cave. It was a secret storage cave he created to deal with his creditors. There was food and drink in the cave, as well as some things that he considered valuable. There was also a barrel of wine. He even raised a sheep there. Normally, if the creditors went to his house in the village, they would never find these things. After living in the wilderness for nearly 3 months, Island did not feel anything other than the boredom of life. In any case, he was living alone in the village. But without the adoring gazes of the girls in the village, life was unavoidably boring. The most important thing was that his hopes of becoming outstanding were still slim. After jumping down from the tree, Island walked into the cave and took out a wooden bowl. He then walked to the side of the goat that was tied to the tree stump at the entrance of the cave. Kneeling down, he squeezed a small bowl of milk from the goat. He then took some food from the cave and ate it together with the milk. There is not much food left. It seems that starting tomorrow I will have to make some animal traps in the forest. Island thought to himself. Next, he leaned against a large rock at the entrance of the cave. With a grass root in his mouth, he raised his head to look at the distant sunset and yawned. The sky is about to turn dark. Another idle day has passed. I wonder when it will be my turn to strike it rich? Just as Lewin was about to fall asleep, he was suddenly awakened by a flash of light in front of him. It looked like a meteor, but when he opened his eyes wide to look, he was dumbfounded. Less than 20 steps away from him, a thin and bright white light had appeared in the air. This white light appeared to be a crack. Then, a human head emerged from the crack. Island was scared stiff. If it were anyone else, they would be so scared that their limbs would go limp when they saw a head appear out of thin air in front of them in the wilderness where the sky was getting dark. The most terrifying thing was that the head seemed to be turning around to look around. Then, it seemed to be mumbling something to itself. That's right. I really did come out from below. Irenti was taken aback by this remark. Below? Where is below? Could it be a grave? Hell? My God. This can't be an evil spirit from hell, right? Island wanted to stand up and run away. However, his body had gone completely limp. He had no control over his body. Finally, when the head turned around, it saw Island, who was lying limp on the ground. The head seemed to be smiling at Irenti. There is someone here? Hey, you. I am talking to you. Where is this place? Island stared with widened eyes. Are you a mute? The head sighed and there was pity in its eyes. Hey mute, move back a little and stay away from me. Be careful not to bump into you. After that, Island saw something that shocked him even more. The white ray of light in the air suddenly became several times longer. Next, a huge crack appeared before him. It's over. It's over. It's the Hell's Gate. Oh God. Oh God. It's the Hell's Gate. The evil spirit is about to come out. Island screamed inwardly. The crack was like a huge mouth and Island could not stop himself from closing his eyes. He dared not look at it, he wailed inwardly. If only I had known this would happen, I would have followed them all to Denzel City. Now, however, I am about to be eaten by the evil spirit. Island waited for a long time. However, the evil spirit did not come to bite him. He tried opening his eyes through a slit. What he saw left him dumbfounded. Where was the evil spirit? That huge crack had already disappeared, and that person's head was also gone. In its place was a large black-colored vehicle. Island staggered up from the ground and stared with widened eyes at the large vehicle before him. Could this vehicle have also come out from hell? As he was letting his imagination run wild, he heard a voice. Hey kid! The voice came from the roof of the vehicle. Next, he saw a fellow about the same age as him climbing up the roof from the other side of the vehicle. The fellow looked at him and bared his teeth at him. Next, the fellow jumped down from the roof of the vehicle and landed before him. After looking at the fellow for a moment, Island was quick to recognize the fellow. He cried out in shock and screamed, "Ah! You are the head! You are the head!" Head? Shea was slightly taken aback. Then, he realized that the young man in farmer's clothing was talking about him. However, when he thought about it carefully, the scene that he had just appeared in was indeed somewhat terrifying for ordinary people. Having reached that line of thought, Shea deliberately smiled at the young man. Unexpectedly, his smile caused Island's eyes to roll back and he fainted. After falling to the ground, he gritted his teeth. His face was ashen and his eyes were tightly shut. So cowardly! Shea sighed and shook his head. Next, he swaggered into the cave. Requesting monthly votes for support, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original. Chapter 344. Requesting votes for support. Monthly votes, recommendation votes. GOR Chapter 325. Enemies often cross paths. Truth be told, Irenti had not actually fainted. He was simply putting on an act. Feigning death was somewhat lacking in spirit. However, when the evil spirit before him bared its fangs at him, Irenti suddenly recalled a legend. Legend has it that evil spirits like to eat the flesh of the living. However, it would appear that they do not eat the dead. Having reached that thought, Irenti had no other choice but to feign death. Thankfully, the heavens were watching over him. After lying on the ground, the evil spirit showed no interest in him. Instead, it walked into its own cave. After a while, Irenti, who was lying on the ground with his eyes closed, heard a cheer coming from the cave. "Aha! There is wine as well. How wonderful!" Soon, the sound of a wine barrel being opened could be heard, and the aroma of wine wafted out. Irenti, who was lying on the ground, suddenly felt his flesh aching. This wine was his most precious collection. "Ah! There is also a sheep. How wonderful! After making a fire, we can roast it." It was the evil spirit's cheer again. Irenti felt as though his teeth were about to break from clenching them. He could only mutter to himself, "Life is more important, life is more important." However, this barrel of wine and this sheep were his most precious possessions that he had gone to great lengths to hide from his creditors. This abominable evil spirit. He did his best to keep his eyes closed as he listened to his sheep bleating. His heart raced. Suddenly, Irenti felt a foot stepping on his chest. He subconsciously opened his eyes and saw the evil spirit's face above him. "How long do you want to sleep? Hurry up and help this great master start a fire. Or do you want this great master to start a fire and cook?" Shea shouted. Seeing that the young man was still pretending to be dead, Shea rolled his eyes and smiled. "Fine, if that is the case, we can choose not to roast the sheep, then we will have to eat human flesh." Whoa! Those words were more effective than anything else. After hearing those words, Irenti cried out in shock and obediently got up from the ground. He stood there trembling, his two legs shaking nonstop. Shea laughed and looked at the pale young man in front of him. "What's your name?" My name is. Iluan stuttered. "Well, I don't care about your name." Shea waved his hand. "Can you make a fire? Do you know how to barbecue meat?" "Yes." Island squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. Shea pointed at the bleeding sheep and said, "I'll give you an hour. If I see a delicious roasted lamb leg, I'll cut off your leg and roast it. Do you understand?" Ilut's eyes darted back and forth before he finally dropped to his knees and kowtowed repeatedly, begging, "Please let me go. I only have this one sheep in my entire fortune. If you eat it, my whole family will starve to death. I have an 80-year-old mother and a 7-year-old child." "Ah!" Shea was amused when he heard that. He glared at the young man in front of him. Okay. An 80-year-old mother? You look like you're only 20 years old, right? If your mother is 80 years old, then I'll be damned. A 7-year-old child. Did you have a son when you were 13? Damn it, kid. Do you know that the thing I hate the most is people acting dumb in front of me? After saying that, he kicked Iluan. But this island was very clever. Before Shea's kick could reach his body, he had already rolled on the ground. He deliberately rolled 10 times in an exaggerated manner and loudly cried out in pain. When Shea saw Iluan's shameless appearance, he laughed. He felt that this young man was quite, damn it, he's quite similar to me when I was young. With that thought in mind, Shea reached into his clothes and tossed something over. Iluan heard a ding sound as a shiny object fell on the ground in front of him. He stared at it and held his breath. It was a gem the size of an egg. It was a shiny, transparent gem. With just this one gem, let alone a lamb, he could use it all to buy a lamb. He could eat lamb every day for the rest of his life, eat lamb for every meal until the day he died. Iluan's face was filled with excitement. He held the gem with both hands and raised his head. This is for you. Shea pursed his lips. There were still 2 compartments full of such gems in the carriage. They were all looted from the goblin's warehouse. Although these magic gems had exhausted their magic power, they were still valuable even if they were ordinary gems. Seeing the young man thanking him profusely, Shea became impatient. Start a fire and roast the meat. If you say another word of nonsense, I'll take back the gem. These words were more effective than anything else. Iluan immediately shut his mouth and hurried to the side to get busy. Slaughtering the lamb, cutting the meat, washing the fur, starting a fire and roasting the meat. This kid was very busy and attentive. Even Lao Tzu, who served him in the past, was not as diligent as he was now. After the lamb was roasted, Shea smelled the fragrant aroma of the roasted meat and was overjoyed. He had been eating dry rations along the way with Hastings. It had been many days since he smelled the aroma of meat. Not to mention, there was still wine. Shea sat next to the bonfire in an ostentatious manner, holding a crispy roasted lamb leg in one hand and a wooden bowl that was originally filled with goat milk in the other. Iluan stood to the side with his head lowered. He held the wine barrel in his arms and poured wine into Shea's bowl from time to time. Shea took a mouthful of wine and a mouthful of meat. The lamb leg was quickly devoured. Then, he patted his belly in satisfaction and said with a smile, "You brat, you roasted some good meat." Iluan's heart calmed down a little. He was no longer as scared as before. Half of it was because of the effect of the gemstone. The other half was because he had seen through something. This old man did not seem to be an evil spirit. Evil spirits in the legends ate the flesh of living people and were afraid of heat and fire. But this old man was sitting by the fire, eating a steaming hot roast lamb leg happily. Obviously, he was not an evil spirit. Although the scene when he appeared was too strange, but, thinking about it, he seemed to be an expert with great skills. Iluan's eyes lit up at the thought of expert. He could not help but look up at the sky with tears in his eyes. Could it be that the gods have finally opened their eyes and I, Iluan, have finally changed? After eating and drinking, Shea stopped smiling. He looked at Iluan and questioned him for a while. He first asked where he was. Then, Shea confirmed that he was still in the Shire of Moor. The spatial rift created by the lightsaber was not too far away. According to the young man named Irenti, he was now in a barren mountain forest about 10 miles away from the uninhabited village he had come from. This news made Shea a little happy in his heart. Originally, he was worried that the spatial rift created by him would not send him too far away. If he ended up in the south, or somewhere like Odin or Lantis, then that would be fun. Now that he knew that he was still in the northern part of the Shire of Moor, and that this place was not too far away from Denzel City, It would only take him about 3 days on a fast horse. Then, this was good news. So, you are a Byzantium citizen? A villager from the Shire of Moor? You did not follow anyone to Denzel City and hid in the mountains? After asking about this young man, Shea could not help but smile. You are a strange fellow. If I were to say that you are a coward, then you would dare to hide in enemy territory. Are you not afraid of being caught and eaten by Odin's men? If I were to say that you are brave, then you were scared half to death when you met me just now. Illuin gave an embarrassed smile and regarded Shea for a moment before gingerly asking, That, then, may I ask who you are, me? Shea puffed out his chest and said, Listen up, I am not some evil spirit. I am the Commander-General of the Shire of Moor. Do you understand? Shire of Moor? For a young farmer like Illuin, the position of Shire of Moor was a high-ranking official. Illuin immediately grew nervous. That was especially true after hearing Shea's answer. Excitement suddenly welled up within the young farmer's heart. Shire of Moor General? Doesn't that fit my first fantasy? Meeting a general, then joining the army, make a great contribution in battle and achieve meteoric success. Isn't that what I am meeting right now? Then there is the second dream, meeting an otherworldly expert and learning a whole body of mysterious skills. This fellow before me has such miraculous skills. Doesn't that mean he is a ready-made expert? It would appear that 2 of my dreams have come true. It seems God is blessing me, Illuin. Who knows, maybe my 3rd dream, that noble lady's luck in love will come true as well. Having reached that line of thought, Illuin hesitated for a moment before looking at Shea. He could not help but ask, That, sir, may I ask if you have any beautiful sisters or daughters? Bang! Illuin fell to the ground, his left eye turning black and blue. After resting for a moment, Shea asked, All right, I cannot stay here for long. Do you have a horse? I have brought such a big carriage with me. There should be a beast to pull it, right? Illuin revealed a wry smile and spread out his hands. Shea looked at Illuin and saw that he was dressed very simply. He did not seem like someone who could afford a horse. Shea sighed and said, That, if you don't have a horse, do you want me to pull the carriage all the way to Denzel City? After saying that, he thought for a moment. Finally, his eyes fell upon Illuin and his eyes lit up. You look tall and strong, so you should have some strength. All right. It's you. Go find a rope to fasten the carriage. Let's go. Illuin felt that he was not blessed by God, but cursed. A thick rope was tied around his body, just like an animal, and he was dragging the carriage behind him. This damned carriage was not as heavy as he had imagined. It could even be said that it was surprisingly light, but no matter how light it was still a carriage. What's more, that damned Lord General was sitting on the carriage with a swagger. If he had walked a little slower, he would have been hit by the whip. Although he had not really been hit, Illuin had not suffered much since he was young. He was originally someone who liked ease and hated work. This time, he was very tired. After walking for half the night, one of his shoes had fallen off. He was panting as if he would faint at any time. The sound of pulling the carriage was so tight that half of his shoulder was almost broken. Finally, in the latter half of the night, Shea called for a stop. Looking at the young man who was so tired that he could only gasp for breath, Shea was a little dissatisfied. You look so strong, but it turns out that you're just a useless thing. What a waste of your size. Okay, let's stop and rest for a few hours. We'll continue our journey after dawn. Illuin felt as if he had been pardoned and immediately fell to the side of the road. But Shea jumped down and kicked him up. Illut was suddenly scared, but when he looked up, he saw Shea looking at him with a smile. The dew is outside, and the humidity is high at night. Sleep in the carriage. Illuin was overjoyed. He climbed into the carriage with trembling feet and sat next to Shea. But Illuin did not understand. This old man had a strange temperament. When he was sleeping, he would not close the carriage door. The carriage was also very strange. There was only one door in the carriage, and not even a window. After sleeping for who knows how long, Iluan was exhausted. He had never slept so soundly in his life. After a while, he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from a distance. Then, he felt his body shake a few times. He opened his eyes in a daze. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Shea, who was beside him, covered Iluan's mouth with one hand and whispered into his ear, "Don't make a sound if you don't want to die." Shea's face was stern. Clearly, he was nervous. This country bumpkin had reason to be nervous. He had been sleeping in this forest when he was suddenly woken up by a distant rumbling sound. Shea had just turned over when he saw a flash of light coming from the distant hillside. Then, a series of rumbling sounds rang out like a series of muffled thunder. Of course, Shea was very clear that this was definitely not thunder. Given his level of skill, he was able to determine that those sounds were the result of a fierce battle between top-notch experts. Those thunder-like sounds were the sounds of violent explosions and collisions. Only top-notch experts could create such a commotion. As for those lights, they were either magic or do-chi. Shea quickly closed the door of the carriage. Then, he saw a flash of lightning coming down from the distant hillside. It directly struck the hilltop and almost flattened half of the forest on the hilltop. Then, in the dark night, with the help of the flames created by the lightning, several figures flew out from the distance and headed towards him. However, this wasn't what made him nervous. What really made his expression change was a few words of shouting coming from afar through the wind. "Mr. Peach. I knew you were up to no good. But to fall out with me now, aren't you being too impatient? It's too early to fall out with me. Haha, if you didn't deliberately hide it, I wouldn't have made such a difficult decision. You should know that I have always admired you. Unfortunately, that thing is extremely important to my clan. I must get it, so. What a well-hidden Mr. Peach. This move of yours seems to be the Elven clan's nature magic, right? I didn't think that there would be someone among the Odin who could use Elven magic. I have long suspected your origin. Sure enough, you don't make any useless efforts. Although you are an expert, I wouldn't act rashly if I didn't have full confidence. What you drank earlier was the Elven clan's Hieroman's spring water. The toxicity of this spring water was recorded during the Great War tens of thousands of years ago. There were many experts who died under this spring water. You, Hastings, are not the first, and you won't be the last. Hastings? Shea's expression changed. It was incomparably wonderful. Damn, why did I have to run into this guy after escaping? But, it seems like this time, I have run into him? Then, should I take this opportunity, to beat him while he is down? As Shea was hesitating, the several figures quickly arrived at a place not far from him. With several shio-shio sounds, the several figures landed tens of meters away from the forest. Although they were quite far away, Shea could still see them clearly with his superior eyesight. After the several figures landed, the one in the middle was wearing black clothes and soft armor. He held a triangular war spear in his hand and had a grave expression on his face. It was none other than Hastings. There were 4 people around him. 3 of them formed a triangle with Hastings in the middle. The 3 of them were dressed in long white robes, with layers of headscarves and masks covering their head. Only their eyes were exposed. The 3 of them were tall and slender. They held thin short swords in their hands and carried small short bows on their back. As for the 4th person, he was an old man with a tall stature. This old man's face was full of wrinkles and his appearance appeared mediocre. However, he had a pair of bright and clear eyes. Those eyes were not something an old man of his age should have. They were like 2 pearls embedded in a piece of dead pork. Hastings, how much longer can you hold on? The old man sighed. You have already drunk the spring water. With your own ability, you can't resist the poison. Hastings sneered and shook the triangular war spear in his hand. "If you want to take Hastings's life, I'm afraid you don't have enough people." After saying that, Hastings took the initiative to charge forward with his spear. The 3 figures immediately surrounded him. In an instant, the 4 figures were locked in battle. Only the shadows of swords and spears could be seen. Silver Do-Chi and black flames intertwined. Hastings alone was able to completely suppress the Do-Chi of the 3 people surrounding him. Shea muttered in his heart, "Should I go up or not? If I go up, who should I help? You have to vote when reading." To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 345. Please refer to the end of this chapter. GOR Chapter 326. Save Me. 1. Hastings was indeed Hastings. Once the tri-edged war spear was unleashed, a black flame engulfed the area. The black flame engulfed the 3 white-robed men, making it impossible to see them clearly. Clanging sounds of collisions could be heard as the 3 white-robed men's weapons continuously clashed with Hastings's tri-edged war spear. Hastings looked like an awe-inspiring war god. Every time he clashed with his opponent's weapon, one of the white-robed men would be sent flying along with his sword. The 3 white-robed men besieging Hastings were like clowns in a circus. One after another, they would be sent flying. Then, they would rejoin the battle and be sent flying again. After observing for a while, Shea gradually realized that something was wrong. On the surface, it looked like Hastings had the upper hand, but in reality, the 3 white-robed men surrounding him were very strange. Although they were constantly sent flying by Hastings, they were able to disperse most of Hastings' fierce attacks with ease. Then, they would fly back as if they were as light as a feather. Whether it was in terms of movement or speed, they didn't seem to be injured at all. Additionally, Shea could see that each of the 3 white-robed men besieging Hastings was extremely powerful. If he were to fight them alone, they would not be inferior to him. In other words, each of these 3 white-robed men was at least at the level of a senior warrior. What was even more strange was that after the 3 white-robed men besieged Hastings for a while, their bodies gradually emitted a faint green light. Then, the 3 white-robed men quickly circled around Hastings. When one of them was sent flying, the other one would immediately move horizontally to replace his companion's position. The one behind him also continued to move horizontally. Gradually, as they ran back and forth, a green circle of light flashed under their feet. The green light seemed to be emerging from the ground. It faintly formed a circular outline that enveloped the 3 white-robed men. Hastings's black flame aura was gradually suppressed. The faint green light seemed to be able to dissolve Hastings's resplendent flame aura bit by bit. Looking at the periphery, the old man called Mr. Peach was shaking his sleeves and chanting something that no one could make out. Shea, on the other hand, carefully listened to 2 sentences and Dora's vigilant voice immediately sounded in his mind. Elven language. Then Dora immediately said, "These guys are elves. The 4 white-robed men besieging Hastings are all elves." Following Mr. Peach's chanting, the green circle of light enveloping Hastings's feet grew brighter and brighter. Hastings could clearly feel the pressure. His face became gloomier. Under the green light, the 3 white-robed men who were besieging him suddenly exuded a powerful aura. Whether it was their strength or their movements, they were much more agile. Hastings's spear sent one flying. This time, the white-robed man who was sent flying turned in midair and quickly flew back. Instead, he fiercely stabbed his sword towards Hastings's throat. Hastings laughed nastily and shouted loudly, "Mr. Peach, in order to take Hastings's life, you actually used such a forbidden spell and sacrificed the lives of these 3 experts. To think that my life is so valuable to you." Mr. Peach chanted while shaking his head. When he finished chanting, Hastings's black flame aura was greatly weakened. It was already suppressed by the 3 white-robed men. The 3 short swords flashed and almost forced Hastings into a corner. Hastings could only barely block with his tri-edged war spear. Mr. Peach sighed and slowly said, "To kill an expert, you naturally have to pay a price. Although these 3 are the elites of our tribe, but for the sake of the tribe, they are already prepared to sacrifice themselves at any time. Hastings, after all, you and I are friends. As long as you are willing to compromise and hand over." "Ha! You think I will believe you?" Hastings laughed and held his tri-edged war spear horizontally. The intense black flame aura rolled out again and forced the 3 people in front of him to retreat. He sneered, "You betrayed us and plotted against Lao Tzu. Now, no matter what you say, I will only treat it as a fart." Mr. Peach was not angry. He smiled and said, "You are used to being tyrannical for half your life. Naturally, I don't have much hope." "Humph, just because you are an expert you think you can do whatever you want? Hastings, since you are so powerful, why can't you deal with the 3 of us who are much weaker than you? Do you feel a sharp pain in your heart?" It felt like a needle was stabbing into his body again and again. "Do you feel that it is difficult to breathe? Do you feel that your chest is stuffy? Do you feel that your whole body is somewhat sluggish, but some parts of your limbs are twitching uncontrollably from time to time?" With every sentence he said, Hastings's eyes became more and more gloomy. Finally, Mr. Peach smiled and said, "Believe me, you are not the first expert who has been poisoned to death by the hierarch spring water you drank. Now, you must feel that your resplendent flame aura is not under your control, right? Every time you release a bit of resplendent flame aura, you have to expend several times or even 10 times more energy than usual, right?" Hastings snorted. Seeing the 3 swords stabbing towards him, he twisted his body and immediately, a string of afterimages appeared. This was the ability of an expert to twist time and space, to break through the rules and limits of speed. However, when his string of afterimages flew out, after just a few steps, they suddenly seemed to hit an invisible wall. The green light in the surroundings immediately bounced his body back. Hastings was shocked, but he heard Mr. Peach sneer and say, "Do you think it is so easy to kill an expert? This is a life force array. I absorbed the life force of countless plants in the surroundings to set up this array just to trap you. Hastings, if you did not drink the hierarch spring water, I naturally would not be able to trap you. But now, you are already at the end of the road." Hastings was bounced back, and the 3 swords behind him followed like shadows. With a schwa sound, one of the swords finally pierced Hastings' arm. Hastings snorted and glared. Suddenly, a burst of anger erupted, and with a loud shout, the tri-edged war spear suddenly swept across. How powerful was the final strike of a powerhouse filled with rage! The white-robed man who stabbed Hastings' arm was swept by the tri-edged war spear. In an instant, the tri-edged war spear erupted with an unparalleled black flame aura, and with a boom, the white-robed man was sent flying. But this time, although the green light disintegrated a lot of the black flame aura, the black flame aura seemed to be gushing out. The green radiance was clearly unable to withstand the attack. With a blood-curdling scream, the short sword in the white-robed man's hand was instantly torn to pieces. His body was also engulfed by the fierce black flames. It was as if he was a rag doll being twisted by an invisible force. With a purring sound, the white-robed man was split into several pieces in midair. The black flame aura instantly burned all his blood, and the pieces of his body that fell to the ground did not even shed a single drop of blood, as if they had turned into hard and dry stone. After suddenly exploding with divine might and killing one, Hastings' momentum weakened. He forcefully stabbed his tri-edged war spear into the ground, and his body repeatedly retreated. The other 2 fellows looked at each other, and without hesitation, turned around and charged forward again. Hastings blocked with his spear, barely blocking for a moment, but he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. This mouthful of blood actually made a "chee" sound when it hit the ground. The blood was boiling hot and even emitted white steam. Hastings, you've been poisoned deeply. All the blood in your body will boil along with the poison. It's as if you've been placed into a large pot to cook. But what's boiling you is not water, but your blood. As it boils, your blood will become less and less. Mr. Peach sneered. Let's see how much blood you have left. Hastings could no longer hide the pain on his face. He forcefully leaned on his tri-edged war spear, and relied on his speed to barely dodge the attacks of the two white-robed men. After dodging a few more times, he suddenly felt that his strength could not continue. The black flame aura suddenly disappeared from his body, and with a "pew" sound, a sword pierced into his waist. Hastings originally appeared to be extremely weak, but at this moment, his eyes suddenly opened, and a sharp light burst out from his eyes. He suddenly let go of his tri-edged war spear, and viciously punched the face of the white-robed man in front of him. It was probably because Hastings had suddenly let go of his tri-edged war spear. This action was too sudden. Furthermore, Hastings, who was already weak, suddenly burst out with such a vigorous strength. The moment he attacked, Mr. Peach, who was standing to the side, knew that he had been tricked. The power of Hastings's punch was obvious, and the black flame aura violently swept out. Immediately, the white-robed man's head exploded with a "pring" sound, like a pumpkin that had been smashed by an iron rod. The corpse flew out, and Hastings flew out with a kick, landing on the leg of the third white-robed man. With a "caw" sound, the white-robed man was kicked away. Unfortunately, Hastings was exhausted, and the strength of this kick was too weak. It did not even break the white-robed man's leg. The white-robed man fell to the ground, rolled a little, and immediately stood up. Although he seemed to have suffered a small loss, and his legs were not as nimble as before, he still raised his sword and charged forward. Hastings sighed in his heart, and suddenly opened his mouth, spitting out a mouthful of boiling hot blood. It sprayed on the ground with a "chee-chee" sound, and white steam bubbled out. Hastings fiercely gritted his teeth, and suddenly punched his own chest, and with this punch, he spat out another mouthful of blood. This blood arrow directly splashed towards the third white-robed man. The white-robed man was rushing forward, and when he saw the red blood rushing towards him, he could only barely turn his body sideways. However, his legs were not as nimble, and this side of his body was half a beat slower. Suddenly, a "chee" sound was heard, and boiling hot blood sprayed onto the left side of his face. This white-robed man let out a mournful scream. Hastings's blood was boiling hot, and directly sprayed onto the white-robed man's face. With this splash, the white-robed man's face was instantly scalded to a pulp. The left eyeball was also instantly scalded blind. Hastings was about to rush forward and kill this white-robed man, when Mr. Peach finally moved. This old man's body suddenly flashed, and blocked in front of Hastings. He lightly slapped Hastings's wrist, causing Hastings to stagger. Mr. Peach took 2 steps back, and from both his sleeves, he took out a small round wheel. With a flash of light, the 2 wheels in his hands enlarged several times, and became a pair of strange weapons. The ring was covered with sharp blades that flashed with a cold light. In the middle of the ring there was a green gem that emitted a soft light. This was clearly a magical weapon. Mr. Peach combined the 2 wheels, and with a "hong" sound, a green light blasted out, directly hitting Hastings's body. Hastings did not even have time to make a sound, and was directly sent flying, piercing through 2 thick trees behind him, and heavily landing on the ground far away. The thin armor on Hastings's chest had been shattered, and his flesh was badly mangled. After falling to the ground, he struggled for a bit, and barely managed to sit up. Seeing Hastings so unyielding, Mr. Peach could not help but change his expression. He stood far away, and slowly walked over step by step, Hastings is indeed Hastings. You were poisoned so deeply, and I used a life magic array to restrain your dark aura, and yet you still have so much strength, killing 2 experts of my race, and injuring 1. Hey! Hastings was already somewhat delirious. He sat there, and his eyes were somewhat muddy. He subconsciously raised his hand with a shio sound. The tri-edged war spear on the ground suddenly flew into his hand. With Hastings's spear in hand, Mr. Peach's expression immediately became more serious. But this time, Hastings only held the spear, and finally, with a gudong sound, he finally fell back, and even the tri-edged war spear fell to the ground once more. Mr. Peach was afraid that Hastings would use the same trick again, deliberately showing weakness like before, and then suddenly counterattack. But after looking at the situation for a while, he was sure that Hastings was truly unable to make it. Kill him, he is also a hero of his generation, give him a quick death. Mr. Peach snorted. Beside him, the guy with half of his face turned to mush slowly stepped forward. At this time, a shio sound suddenly came from afar. A sharp tree stick fell from the sky, and shot from afar, straight for the white-robed man's face. This came too suddenly, and fortunately, the white-robed man immediately slashed with his sword, and only then did he split the tree stick. But a figure, like an ape, rushed out from the forest, and directly landed in front of him. He opened his hand and something unknown was thrown at him. It looked like a ring. With a boom, a violent flame soared to the sky. The figure had already picked up Hastings, turned around and ran. I was unable to return home last night, sorry. I have just returned, so I have to quickly upload this chapter. In addition, there are 2 more updates for today. And that's right, there are 2 more updates for today. In other words, this one is from Sunday, and there are 2 more updates, one from yesterday and one from today. Also, it won't be too late, I will do it as soon as possible. Sorry for the long wait, actually, the matter of slacking off, fine, I will be honest. Now, 5th bro's spring has arrived, hehe. These past 2 days, I have spent some time with my girlfriend Air. I hope everyone can understand, even a 30-year-old bachelor needs spring. Another reason that made me sigh is, back then, there was a woman who said to me, "You treat readers better than me." And now I don't want this to happen again. So, I hope everyone can understand. Alright, there are 2 more updates for today. I will continue to update them before 10 o'clock. The first update is estimated to be around 6 o'clock. To be continued, if you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.